It's your theorem, your supposition, your postulate.
Honest.
If that front ain't in gangsta, your back end won't be able to show its full potential.
Understanding.
You're gonna suck. You're gonna suck for the next couple of years.
Passionate.
I'm all over social media. I live it.
This is the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
Hashtag facts.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Now, here's Kevin.
Well, I had great fun on Saturday. Watching a little bit of NBA hoops. Admittedly, my Saturday didn't start off the way that I planned. I was supposed to be in Annapolis. I was supposed to be paddleboarding. I woke up. My wife's like, hey, it's like 30-mile-an-hour winds out there. Yo ass going to be a kite if you go out there and paddleboard. So I didn't do paddleboard. I didn't do that, but I did watch the NBA game. And let me tell you, as someone that had banged the drum on Friday to lay the 3.5 with the Pacers, it was sensational to watch. The Pacers laying the smackdown on the candy ass of one New York. It was amazing. I have had so much fun watching in the misery of the New York Knicks fans because the way that they have spent the weekend crying and bitching and moaning and doing everything under the sun to make them feel like the victim, the small man, what have you. It was wonderful to watch them fall the way that they did. The game itself was just a track meet from the jump. They needed a lot from Jalen Brunson. They got a little from Jalen Brunson. Indiana needed a lot from somebody. They got it from Pascal Siakam. Even just the lead up to this game, I thought was really, really unique. We had talked about this on Friday, and I'm really glad. As someone, I see myself in Timothée Chalamet, minus like the large amounts of fame and money. But I see myself in Timothée Chalamet as someone that grew up as a blog boy, him for the New York Knicks, me for the Washington Wizards, spending a lot of time on various different message boards in the era of Gilbert Arenas, then in the era of one John Wall, being a fan loyal to the soil, and then seeing your team get to heights that you could have never imagined. I'm still waiting for the Wizards to get to an Eastern Conference Finals. But Timothée Chalamet got to live that dream. And then he took Kylie Jenner to Indiana. Max, how many times do you think Kylie Jenner, prior to this past weekend, had ever stepped foot in Indiana?
Maybe like once or twice when she was a kid. But aside from that,
even
never.
That seems like a reach.
Yeah,
I can't imagine
sure.
There's a lot going on in the great state of Indiana that would attract a billion-dollar business mogul. We can debate how she got that money, but she ain't spending a lot of time in Indiana. Not a lot of pop-outs, I think, in Indiana. But he got this mega billionaire mogul to Indiana, and to watch them lose. Oh, it was phenomenal. As soon as I saw Kylie Jenner there, I was like, wrap this bad boy up. This is over.
Not a believer in the Kylie Jenner stat where she was 2-0?
I have seen the Kylie Jenner stat, and that is exclusively why I knew this series was over. Because if she's going to be a Knicks fan, you got to experience the roller coaster of being a Knicks fan. You don't get to – I know she's been born – she's not even born on third base. She's born halfway to home for a lot of things in life.
Just
sports, not one of them. It's
Nope.
the great equalizer, the great evener, the balance beam, if you will. As soon as Kylie Jenner, who is beautiful, as soon as I saw her sitting courtside hugging on old Timmy Chalamet when Timothée Chalamet was like, it's an elimination game, babe. I need to focus. He didn't want nothing.
A little more than hugging, my man.
I mean, well, it was one-sided hugging. It looked like.
But Timmy C's stressed.
Exactly. And
playoffs.
when she was being like, this is fun, this is grandiose, I knew this was over.
Oh, no.
She
Life
just
and
quite
death.
doesn't understand. You could point to a lot of different things in the game itself. The simple fact is this. On one side, you have a team led by Rick Carlisle, who is a sensational head coach. And on the other side, you have Tom Thibodeau. And Tom Thibodeau has been around the NBA for a while. Understood. He's done some really good things in the NBA. He was a part of that 2008 Boston Celtics series with not the dream team, but that big three, the first initial big three. He was a part of that series. Congratulations. He did some stuff with the Bulls. Awesome. He is not in the same class, not in the same caliber as Rick Carlisle. And you saw it because the Knicks had zero gut and zero offense in game 6. When the Pacers were still running stuff, they still had some plays to get into the bag of. The Knicks had nothing. It was a let me give the ball to Jalen Brunson. Save us, please. Channeling the inner Star Wars. Save us, Jalen Brunson. You are our only hope. And Brunson had terribly timed the worst game of the series for him. 8 of 18 for 19, which means you had to rely on everybody else. You needed 30 from Brunson to even make this a competition, even to make this, to give yourself any sort of real chance. You had to have 30 from Brunson. You get 19. OG Anunoby cannot be the leading scorer in an elimination game. It cannot happen. If that is the formula, it is a losing formula. And that's what we saw from New York. They didn't have anybody when they needed a bucket because Brunson wasn't playing at the level that we are accustomed to seeing him. And eventually, like, you just have to have somebody step up. This isn't even an anti-Jalen Brunson thing. He gave everything that he could to get New York to that spot. He didn't have any gas left in the tank. It was very similar to John Wall in game 7 of that Celtics series all those years ago, which this is a nice tie-in because John Wall, if you have somehow missed it, was on Kevin's podcast. So go listen to that after you're done listening to us. And they talked about this particular thing, but it felt very similar to that in that Wall had been awesome that entire series. And in a game 7, the guy was absolutely gassed. The thing is with Jalen Brunson is he only played 34 minutes. Now, part of that is because by the end of it, the game was effectively over, but it's not even like they ran him for 48 minutes. And you could just see by the end, there was nothing left to give. There was no bounce in his legs, and there was no one on this Knicks team that could be the one to step up. So when Indiana comes out of that second half or the halftime break, I don't know if they're taking on Mike's secret stuff, Reggie Miller's secret stuff, Larry Bird's secret stuff, the great state of Indiana. I don't know what they were inhaling to be able to run the way that they did in the third quarter. New York had none of that. They didn't have any sort of adrenaline, it looked like. They didn't have any sort of stamina, it looked like. They were a complete shell of themselves. Karl Anthony Towns did his best, but Karl Anthony Towns, I've been trying to tell everybody that'll listen. Karl Anthony Towns is not that guy. You can show me any sort of number. You can show me a statistic. You can show me a performance. That performance, I guarantee, is coming in a regular season. It ain't coming in the playoffs. This is why I don't buy entirely into the world of analytics. There's a nice balance. I utilize analytics, but there's a nice balance between analytics and eye test. And every time I watch Karl Anthony Towns in a gotta-have-it game, in a gotta-have-it moment, he ain't have it. He never has it. Defensively, he just was not good. There were already reports coming out after the game about how defensively those in the Knicks organization were not thrilled with the way that he performed. And if you are a Knicks apologist, you are entitled to whatever you want to think. But if you are a Knicks apologist, you're going to tell me he was injured. And I do believe that he was banged up playing on a bad ankle. But if you're in the game, the excuses are done. You cannot make them. If you're going to be out there, you got to perform and you got to help your team. And it didn't feel like he did a good job of that. They were minus 17 with Cat on the floor. They were minus 18 with Brunson on the floor. They didn't have any way to stop Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam was a great meme in NBA culture on NBA Twitter for the longest time. Meme no more. That guy's the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Do we care about the Eastern Conference Finals MVP? Is that a prestigious award? No. Tyrese Halliburton does. And boy, was that embarrassing.
He did the Drewski bit.
He did the Drewski bit, but he didn't do it ironically.
No, which makes it all the better.
I mean, he's tapping his chest saying, that's me, Eastern Conference Finals MVP right here. And they said Pascal Siakam, he got to fade into the back like he's Homer Simpson. Like, my bad. I didn't think that was going to be what it was. So he loses that one. Pascal Siakam ends up being the guy that gives the New York Knicks the business. I mean, Halliburton was good, but he still wasn't, he wasn't fantastic. The problem with him is you can't have an 8-point game and then be like, yeah, I'm MVP. You can't happen. You're a superstar. You can't have an 8-point game. You just can't. The Pacers bench was way better. I mean, Obi Toppin is like the cherry on top of this entire thing if you hate the Knicks. And I know there are some fans of the Knicks that are fans of this program. I apologize. Not really, but I apologize. Obi Toppin being drafted by the Knicks and then 18 off the bench, sensational. I mean, the Knicks barely had 18 points, 18 bench points by themselves. They had 20. He had 18 by himself. They went deep into the bench, New York did. Some of it was late in the game. There's a bunch of dudes that played like 2 minutes. Tyler Kolek gets in for 2 minutes. Precious Achua gets in for like 2 minutes. But the game was over by the end of the third quarter. At the end of the third quarter, there was no hope. You could see it on the Knicks. They're like, this is donezo. And now we get into this conversation of what is Tom Thibodeau going to be? What's his future? And his future, honestly, it should not be in New York. You have reached the limit if you are the New York Knicks of what you can accomplish with Tom Thibodeau. And that stinks for somebody that really wants Mike Malone to come here to DC. But the Wizards aren't ready for Mike Malone as a head coach. Because Malone will take you to a championship. He would be great with New York because he takes a team that is at the level that New York is, and he would rise them up to a championship level. But like the Wizards you can't do that with Mike Malone now. You're like 2 years, hopefully 2 years, but you're like 2 years away from that. And so Mike Malone is probably going to go coach the Knicks. Maybe it'll be Jeff Van Gundy, maybe Stan Van Gundy. I know the Knicks fans were tired as hell of Reggie Miller calling games. And that to me is the most hilarious thing that took place this entire series, Max. Watching the Knicks fans was two things. It was watching the Knicks fans complain about Reggie Miller and watching Knicks fans complain about the officiating. Crying on Twitter as if the NBA and the officials were in the back pocket of the Indiana Pacers to screw over the New York Knicks. As if Adam Silver, who is the commissioner of a mega billion-dollar league, would rather see the Indiana team in the finals over the New York team. And then them crying and bitching about Reggie Miller calling the games like you can't turn on the mothership and have Stephen A. Smith spouting about the Knicks every 30 seconds. That organization, that fan base just doesn't know. You don't know real struggle if those are the things that you're complaining about. Oh, Reggie Miller's being too mean. Man, turn that game on mute and keep watching. Like, who listens to commentators like that anyway if you're not a dork like me? I care about commentators because, like, I'm in the business. If you're just a regular fan, throw that thing on mute. Pop the radio broadcast. Like, ESPN is called by Mike Breen, who, for my money, is one of the best play-by-play guys in the NBA, but he also does the Knicks games during the regular season. So, like, he can call games with the Knicks are involved, and it's all good. It's all well and fine. But Reggie Miller says one thing positive about the Pacers, and it's like you're going to go and crucify the guy.
And the biggest thing about Reggie wasn't exclusively complimenting the Indiana Pacers.
Even if he was, I don't care.
Yeah. Every time the Knicks did something good, he was like, that's a great play by Jalen Brunson. That's a great play by OG. It's a great play by Cat. Like, he will compliment and analyze no matter what the stakes are.
It's too soft.
Yeah. Like, New York fans have just gone on this. Like, they've really shown why they don't deserve this success. Because New York Knicks fans all over my timeline have been like, all of America is rooting against the Pacers. No, they're not.
No, they're
Knicks
not. We're the bad guys.
Yeah.
They were the heels.
They
were
were the evil
mega
empire.
heels that were backed by the association and the good guy Pacers with limited aura. Like, Indiana does not have aura, limited aura. But that just kind of matches with what Indiana is. And I'm going to tell you something, Max. I'm 100% serious when I say this.
Okay.
I've already bet the Pacers to win the NBA Finals.
I was hoping you'd say that. It's Shea's aura, which quite frankly can carry a team, versus Tyrese Halliburton's, dare I say, lack of aura.
Not a lot of aura there. Seems like a nice guy. Like Tyrese Halliburton, you might want to, if you're picking NBA players to babysit your kids, he might be good at that. He's kind of campy. Like, it feels like he could come up with some good backyard games to play with the kids to keep them entertained for 20 to 30 minutes. It's hard doing that. I was a summer camp counselor for 40 years, And as I climbed the ladder of a
Mhm.
summer camp, a corporate ladder,
Oh,
corporate
yeah.
Denton, or corporate Mr. Denton to those at summer camp, coming up with some of those games is tough. Now, we did have one, Max, that
Yeah.
we were only allowed to play twice. We could only play this game twice because we got in trouble.
Oh, was it dodgeball related?
It was.
Of course, it always is.
It was called Armageddon.
Oh,
And what it was, we played this at Lifetime Fitness in Sterling. That's where I worked for 4 years. I had this job solely to get the gym membership. As you can tell, I'm super jacked. But I had this solely to get the gym membership.
sure.
So one day the kids were being annoying to us.
As per usual.
So we're like, all right, let's come up with an idea to get some energy out of them, but to get a little bit of
The
some things
competitive
off of
juices
our
flowing.
chest.
Yeah, there you go.
So what we did was we took 4 gym mats.
Okay.
We set them up in a diamond. Those were safe zones.
Sure.
And the objective was to run from mat to mat without getting hit by a gator skin dodgeball.
Much
right?
safer.
All of the counselors were the ones that had the gator skin dodgeballs. So we were just telling the kids, run around. And what it was, if you saw, so we were working with I think it was 9 to 12 was the age range. So if a young 9-year-old girl who had done nothing but color and make bracelets all day was running from mat to mat, she's fine.
Yeah, you're
Just-
safe.
just
You're
gonna
clear.
Get in there. No worries. If the one kid that had been giving you a lot of sass, yelling in the locker room, maybe try to steal someone's lunch, you see him
Turn into Cam Newton in his prime.
and all of a sudden, I look like I was a pitcher. I mean,
Paul Skeens
we
out
were
there.
putting, and some of the counselors were baseball players, so they were putting some serious spin on there. We could play that twice. Once they didn't find out, twice. The second time a parent walked in,
I was gonna say, kid got hit in the face, was crying, and then got report. Yeah.
as a parent was in there. You're like, that's going to be a tough one to explain.
Well,
Thankfully, it was a parent of someone that did not get hit in the face, but
Okay.
it was a parent seeing a child get hit in the face, and it was very clear. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're above the age of 12, you knew exactly what was happening.
Oh, I've had that happen. Because I worked at Rec Pack for a while, and I forget what it's the hula hoops where you set up the tower and you have to knock down all 3 towers. It teaches kids team building and all that.
Right.
But the kids insisted that counselors play, and I was letting it rip.
So you just got to show sometimes you just got to pop out and show them,
It's true.
honestly.
And yeah, a couple kids caught a few strays, and I had to immediately snap out of game mode and back into counselor mode and do some consoling.
And what you do is you use the magic elixir. Oh, did you just get hit in the face with a gator skin ball? Go get some water.
Yeah, go get some water.
Go get some water. You'll be good.
I'll get you an ice pop. You can wait outside and just kind of cool off.
Miraculously, every time the kid got water, they were good.
It works.
It's the magic elixir. Somehow we got onto that from Tyrese Halliburton, but he has the aura of a guy that's a little campy.
Yeah.
But the reason that I bet this, first and foremost, it's too late to bet the Thunder to win the NBA Finals.
You've missed the train.
You're missing the train. They're minus 750 to make the NBA, to win the NBA Finals. So it's too late. The Pacers are plus 500. On top of that, if you look at some of the best upsets in NBA history in the NBA Finals, one of the more recent ones that you were going to come across within the last 15 years was the Dallas Mavericks in 2011 over the Miami Heat, when Miami had Wade, Bosh, and LeBron, first year of that big 3 era. They were massive favorites going up against Dallas and Dirk. It was 1 superstar versus 3 superstars. Miami had been great all season. I mean, so had Dallas, to their credit, but Miami had been great all season. It felt like they were a shoo-in. Max, do you know who the coach was of that Dallas Mavericks team?
Was it Rick Carlisle?
If you guessed Rick Carlisle, you are correct.
Bing.
It was Rick Carlisle. So this guy has a championship experience in overcoming big-time odds, being the underdog and taking down this juggernaut that is OKC. We've reached the point where, as we sit here on Monday, a few days removed from the start of the NBA Finals, everybody and their mother is telling you it's going to be OKC. It's going to be OKC in 4 games. It's going to be OKC 5 games max. The Series is not going to see 6. It certainly will not see 7. Indiana is the only team that I think in the NBA that has the depth to run with OKC. OKC wants to run. Indiana wants to run. And it's really just going to end up being a track meet. There's not a lot of unders that I'm going to be betting in this series in the NBA Finals. I think you're going to see a lot of really high-scoring affairs, really high-scoring basketball games between these 2 teams. But there's something about the coaching differential with Rick Carlisle that I do think gives Indiana a very slight edge. Now the players are gonna have to step up. You can't have a lot of Tyrese Halliburton dud games. You just can't have it. He has one sort of dud at least once in every single series, but you can't have a lot of them. You can't have multiple. If you get two dud games from Tyrese Halliburton, this is going to be a series that's done very, very quickly. I think you'll see the best of Tyrese Halliburton, though, in the NBA Finals. With the conclusion of the Eastern Conference Finals, it also meant that NBA on TNT Inside the NBA came to a close. And I was texting one of my guys about this today, Max, because we lost Around the Horn, Inside the NBA. And then unfortunately this morning I was driving into work. It's like 4:30 a.m. Pick up the phone and I say, oh my God, John Brinkus, a sports science, passed away as well. So in 9 days, you lose Around the Horn, Inside the NBA, and John Brinkus, a sports science. But with the conclusion of Inside the NBA, it is not going to be the same. And I was texting a friend of mine who's very passionate about basketball. And he said, dude, what's the big deal? They're going to ESPN. And I was like, you don't understand how this game works.
ESPN famously letting talent cook.
Whatever ends up becoming of Inside the NBA. And I have no idea what that'll be. A fly just flew into my mouth and we're sitting inside. How did that even happen? How did that even happen?
I have to talk to Roger.
Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna move
no,
on.
that's jarring. That
is like, how did that even happen?
We can take a second.
Not a fly, but a gnat just flew into my mouth. I'm literally sitting inside. This is a sequestered studio, being that like you can't get sound in here. How did a bug get in here? That's terrible. Anyway, what was I talking about? These damn gnats. I was talking about Inside the NBA.
Yes.
It's going to change once it gets to ESPN. People are going to get shoehorned into it. You're not going to have the same sort of creative freedom and liberty. But it also makes me worried, Max. What is their role going to be? No one has told us anything about how Inside the NBA is going to work on ESPN. We assume it'll be a pregame show, but they have a lot of money and a lot of guys allocated to their pregame shows.
Oh.
So how is that going to work? Are they just going to get rid of Stephen A. Smith on the pregame, Michael Wilbon, Bob Myers? Probably not, because they got a lot of money. They didn't just pay Stephen A. Smith all the money in the world for him to not work. They're going to pimp the life out of Stephen A. Smith. So it worries me with that, and no one has told us whether or not Inside the NBA will actually be doing post-game shows. Right now, the post-game show on ESPN for nearly all sports, but certainly for basketball, is one Scott Van Pelt. We love Scott Van Pelt. I love Scott Van Pelt.
We all love SVP.
What are they going to do with that? There's a lot of questions that remain unanswered, and I don't know that I trust the ones that are going to be coming up with the answers at this point in time, because as you mentioned, and as I have mentioned on several different occasions, basketball coverage is where ESPN seems to be at its weakest, despite the fact that they have a significant amount of resources allocated to that. If they come in and let Inside the NBA just be Inside the NBA, they will be fine. But I don't know that I trust them to do that. So some of the great moments that we have gotten from Inside the NBA, I don't know that they'd be able to flourish on ESPN. And one of my favorite things over the weekend after that conference finals ended was seeing some of the tweet that's going around about the best videos of Inside the NBA. And I just see mountains and mountains worth of quote tweets with great moments from the history of that show. There are so many that I could point to and say are my favorite, like Chuck versus everyone in San Antonio is fantastic. Chuck versus everyone in Galveston, Texas is fantastic. But by far, my favorite moment Inside the NBA was this.
Hey, I played in the NBA for 16 years, and I've been on TV for 18 years. It's the first time I ever heard police presence. Wait. They got a police presence? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Wait, come on, man.
Numerous social media reports that LAPD was called.
LAPD was called. See, these two, man. Come on, man. Nobody laughing at them. Come on, man. Because they would. Oh, man. The issue is y'all gotta stop it, man. They would relish. Come on, for a guy to come in the locker room after them.
Hey, Chuck.
So,
Hey, Chuck.
I don't
Hello,
know what this
police.
is. I don't know why.
Hello, police. Chris Paul trying to beat me up.
This is Blake Griffin. Chris Paul trying to get in the locker room. Get down here and save me. Wait.
you can't fake that sort of stuff.
You can't,
The
man.
chemistry is too good. It's too authentic. My fear is if you shoehorn someone like Kendrick Perkins into the mix, it's not going to be the same. If it's Stephen A. Smith, it's not going to be the same. Like I cannot. The great thing about Ernie Johnson is that Ernie Johnson is one, just sensational at his job, but he allows them to be themselves without making him a focal point in a majority of the stories. Like Stephen A. would be trying to tell Charles how basketball should be played. Like I don't need a show where you're trying to tell the NBA guys, can the NBA guys be better? Yeah, I think Shaq hates a little bit too much on this current generation to the point where it's kind of weird. I think that is accurate. But I'm not going to go tell Shaq how to play basketball. And my fear is if ESPN just shoehorns their big time talents that they pay a lot of money to, you're going to get a lot of that.
Yeah, it strikes me as like Stephen A. is going to lecture Charles Barkley and Shaq about one conversation he had one time with Michael Jordan 15 years ago, and that's just going to be the pregame show.
And it's just going to be tough, and it's going to be borderline unwatchable. All right, we'll shift to football in 15 minutes. You will not believe what Mike Florio said about the Washington Commanders ahead of the NFC Championship game. Eric Edholm is going to join us at 11. Coming up next, don't let the Gnats get hot. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. So I got two things. One of which, Max, I understand I am very late to.
Uh-oh.
But I just started watching the show Mobland. Have you heard of it?
No.
So it's a show on Paramount. I believe the season finale was yesterday of season number 1. I did not get there. But I got a recommendation. I was doing my Sunday show on the BetMGM network, and my co-host PJ Glasser was like, you should watch this show. And my wife and I are at a point right now where sports are coming to this halt in the middle of the summer, where now you get like 4 days. It feels like an eternity between basketball games. It
feels like weeks.
4 days between hockey games. And I don't have Masson because I'm not paying extra for it. And the fact that it's not on YouTube TV.
It's also not on Hulu. Like,
what's a travesty. I'm not paying into the hands of billionaires that aren't going to then pay into the team.
Correct.
So I don't buy that.
Fair.
So we watched the first episode, and it's a little raunchy at times. It's, it's pretty self-explanatory, mob style.
Yeah.
You get a mob family versus a mob family, some kids involved, that sort of thing, right? So Tom Hardy is in it. Tom Hardy, I think, is really good. Helen Mirren is in it. Helen Mirren is really good. The cast is pretty intense, pretty crazy. So if you like, I believe, mostly British actors, mostly European, you're going to love this show. I think it's set in like London or something along those lines. But it's set over there in Europe. I thought it was really, really good. So I'm going to keep watching it. It might be my show of the summer this summer. I saw some stuff about Stranger Things too. I mean, we've been a big fan of Stranger Things on this show, Kevin and I.
Really?
So Kevin started watching Stranger Things like right at the time where I started.
Oh, okay.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
And that he was getting caught up to the then 3 seasons. Then the 4th season dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are getting news of the 3rd season coming in November. But did you see how they're going to run this out?
I heard something about it. I know it's
basically
weird, but
3 episodes. So you're getting like 1 episode in November, and it's going to be probably 2.5, 3 hours. Then you're getting another episode like another 4 weeks after that, and the final episode another 4 weeks after that. So binging is they're just completely curb stomping on the idea of binging. I'm dedicated to watching Stranger Things because I put in the amount of time and effort to pay attention to it over the course of the years. But Lord, are they making it difficult to like really enjoy that show. The 2.5 hour finale in season 4 was nearly my breaking point. That's not an episode. That's a movie, which is fine, but you got to let me know if it's going to be a movie. All right. Here's what I actually wanted to get to. The Colorado Rockies in Major League Baseball lost yesterday.
Ooh.
They are now 9-50 on the season. But why I want to bring them up is not because I care about Colorado baseball. I do not. I've been to that stadium before. It is a very nice stadium.
Cheap beers too.
Drinking a Coors Light in Coors Field is pretty nice, I will say. But I bring this up because since May 2nd, the Colorado Rockies, who have 9 wins on the season, since May 2nd, the Colorado Rockies have as many wins as Scotty Scheffler does. Scotty Scheffler has played 4 golf events since May 2nd. The Colorado Rockies have played 28 baseball games, and they have the same amount of wins. Scheffler's won like $10 million, maybe more than that. Some of the prize pots in golf get a little out of control. He has joined, but he has won a ton of money, and he has won the same amount of games the Colorado Rockies have. Now, this does relate to Washington, D.C., because as many of you know, Ken Rosenthal put out a little bit of not a hit piece, but it was a very critical piece against the Washington Nationals last week, in which he compared the Nationals, our Nationals, to the Colorado Rockies, the team that is 9-50. And his larger point was over the course of, X amount of years, they have all been bad. But comparing the Nationals in 2025 in any capacity to the Colorado Rockies is about as malpractice is going to get. Because, by the way, the Nationals, who unfortunately did lose yesterday 3-1 to the Diamondbacks, they've been playing really darn well since that Ken Rosenthal piece dropped. How about that Saturday game, Max? Did you watch this? 10 runs in the first inning, 30 minutes of play. James Wood batted twice in that inning, and it was on Fox Sports. So someone that doesn't want to pay for Masson like me could actually go and watch the game. Baseball is kind of fun again when you got some superstars. Who would have thought?
The bats have been on fire these past 6 games. Like they got took the loss last night, but it was Corbin Burns on the mound for the most of it, and he blew out his shoulder, so that's not great for the Diamondbacks. But the Nats bats have been so fun. Like Dalen Lyle has been, and Robert Hassel have both just been incredible on the call up. I think Hassel might even earn himself some regular MLB playing time. So yeah, the young bats are young.
They
Nats are
got
back.
some dudes, and James Wood is laying the wood. He has 7 homers here. He had, because it is no longer the month of May, but he had 7 homers in the month of May. 4 of them came in the last 7 games. The guy has been on fire to close out the month of May. He should be in the home run derby. The Nationals should fight to get him in the home run derby. I understand that there are guys that sometimes do not like to compete in the home run derby because they feel like their swing gets heavily adjusted because they're just trying to hack it for a weekend, and it messes up the flow of the regular season for them if they're trying to win championships or things of that nature. I think James Wood needs to be in the home run derby. One, because I want some local representation in the home run derby. It's always a ton of fun, whether it was Harper, Soto, but to watch a national compete in the home run derby, I still like the home run derby. I know they've done about 86 different changes to it over the last 6 years, but I still enjoy watching the home run derby. Wood is a superstar. He is a legitimate superstar. The numbers that he's putting up to this point in the season, he's averaging 286 at the plate, 16 homers, 44 RBIs. All of those numbers, Max, are nearly identical to the numbers that in the same amount of time were put up by Bryce Harper and Juan Soto. But the major difference is you could kind of hide Bryce Harper and Juan Soto in the lineup at times, or at least there was so much more in that lineup that you weren't just focusing on one singular guy. James Wood is the guy here in DC. You could very easily pitch around him if you were the opposition, should you choose to, and it just doesn't work. The Nationals need to pay that man. And if they do not, I don't know who the owner is going to be, but if they do not, we are going to have hunger strikes outside of the operation there. They got to keep this superstar. If you let Harper go, fine, whatever. You turn around, you win a championship. You let Soto go because you get this big, crazy haul. Well, you better start keeping guys. And so you avoid the hit pieces that Ken Rosenthal made about how this rebuild is taking forever because the ownership doesn't pay for guys. It's time to start paying for some dudes. And I know that he's repped by Scott Boras. It makes my heart sink every time I think about the great Nationals players that are repped by Scott Boras, because everyone that you want to keep right now is basically repped by Scott Boras. And it sucks because that dude is kind of respectfully to Mr. Boras, he's basically the devil in these scenarios. He gets his guy money, and he usually does it at the cost of the team that they were playing with before. But you got to hand a blank check to this James Wood kid, man. He is an absolute superstar. And if you want to get back to the peak where we were at points in time in the 2019 season, it starts by keeping guys like James Wood around. Coming up next, you will not believe what Mike Florio had to say about the Commanders and their preparation for the NFC Championship. Eric Edholm is going to join us in 20 minutes' time. You don't want to miss it. It's Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day.
All right, a pretty light weekend around the world of sports. The Nats, they followed the Diamondbacks yesterday by a score of 3-1. The Nats have won 4 of their last 6 and will begin their series versus the Chicago Cubs tomorrow at 6:45. Arizona starting pitcher Corbin Burns possibly blew out his arm in the game versus the Nats yesterday. He said, quote, "My elbow is done, comma, it's dead," end quote. According to some lip readers, he said to a pitching coach. The NBA Finals are set. The Indiana Pacers finish off the New York Knicks over the weekend, 125-108. They will take on the Oklahoma City Thunder starting on Thursday. And sports fans around the world are grieving today after it was announced in a Facebook post that sports science host John Brinkus has passed away following a bout with depression. The multi-time Emmy winner was very open regarding his mental health struggles, and his family has urged those who struggle with similar afflictions to seek help. He was 54. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980 and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
Eric at HomeNFL.com coming up in 15 minutes here on the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on a Monday. Kevin will be back on Wednesday. It's Linnell tomorrow. For those of you that are asking, he's on vacation. It's the middle of the summer, basically.
Kevin
Summer
is
for
just-
us, not for if you have school kids.
Right. Kevin's enjoying himself, as he should be.
As he should be. He doesn't need to come into work in June. He's put in years of his life to this craft. So I was stunned when I came across this soundbite this weekend. This happened after I saw it for the first time after we went off air on Friday, but we had to bring this up. Mike Florio is very well known in this industry, and his name carries a certain degree of weight. What he says is not gospel, admittedly.
It's gossip.
But it is gossip. His name carries a certain degree of weight. This is what Mike Florio said on Friday, talking about the Commanders and the NFC Championship game from earlier this year.
The day of the NFC Championship, someone I know who is very well plugged in said the Commanders know they're going to get their asses kicked today, and they're just kind of bracing for it. And it's like, come on, man. I mean, no, I know people in the building, they know what's coming. And it's like, well, maybe they're just preparing for the worst. Like, no, they know that the Eagles are dramatically better than they are.
So Mike Florio having the source saying that Washington knew in the NFC Championship that they were going to get their tail kicked. I believe this to an extent, Max. I believe this from this standpoint. Philadelphia's defense, everybody in the NFL recognized how dominating Philadelphia's defense was. And then on top of that, there were not a lot of holes on their offense.
No.
Outside of, depending who you ask, Jalen Hurts. Because most people don't think Jalen Hurts is all that spectacular. He's won a championship now. I don't think he's all that spectacular. Now, what I do not think is that they walked in there expecting it was going to be 55-22, which I have seen then now people on social media take what Florio says is that, Washington knew they were going to get whooped by 30. I don't agree with that at all. I don't believe that to be the case. What I believe Mike Florio was trying to say, or what his source was trying to say that he was then trying to share with the public, is that Washington knew there were going to be parts of the game, defensive line, offensive line, where it was going to be a battle they were not going to win. I do not believe that they thought they were going to lose by 30 walking into the NFC Championship game. Not with a single fiber of my being do I believe they thought they were going to lose by 30, because they have number 5. And if we had the love for Jane Daniels the way that we did towards the end, I can only imagine how magnified that was amongst the coaching staff, understanding that he is one of the very few Band-Aids that could fix a bullet wound. Most of them cannot. It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of Band-Aid, but Jane Daniels is the Band-Aid that could fix a bullet wound. The bullet wound is the fact that defensively you can't stop the run. They could not stop the run. In the game against Detroit stopped running the football because Ben Johnson needed to prove that he was an intelligent human being and then started running a bunch of nonsense. Not that that was going to be the deciding factor of the game. Washington was still going to beat Detroit. They were going to beat Detroit no matter what, but they stopped running the football. Philadelphia was never going to stop. So what I believe he was trying to say was that they knew there were going to be elements of the game where it was going to be difficult, which then you can pivot into this offseason and say, how should they and how have they gotten better in those regards? And the answer is kind of alarming because I don't look at the defensive line and say that they are substantially better than what they were in 2024 or in this game where they knew they were going to get their tails kicked by Philadelphia. You have to get another guy on the defensive line to get after the passer. And I am going to yell and complain about not getting a defensive pass rusher until the cows come home, until we start this season and somebody proves to me that they are a pass rusher, or heaven forbid they prove that they are not a pass rusher and we have this conversation all over again. And then how did you waste an entire season of Jane Daniels in this rookie contract and not going and getting a pass rusher? I do think there is a much different kind of pressure on the organization this year based off of the expectations that were now set because of last year. You can't make the NFC Championship game in the rookie season of your quarterback in the first year of this recalibration and then not enter the next season with the expectation that it's possible again. We know it's a lot easier said than done to just say they're going back to the NFC Championship game. There have been so many examples of guys achieving certain heights one year, teams achieving certain heights one year, and then never achieving them again. Aaron Rodgers is a great example. How many times did we think he was going to play in a Super Bowl after they won the first one? Tell you what, a lot more than one. He's only been one time. So the expectation is that you're going to eventually climb that mountaintop, but you never know, which does make this offseason a little bit more difficult to stomach in that they did not go out there and get a guy that you feel confident at playing the defensive end spot. You have to be able to hold your own on defense if you want to beat Philadelphia. Everything is about chasing them. They are right now, as much as the Eagles, just personally, as much as the Eagles suck, as much as the fan base sucks, as much as the city sucks. Right now, they are the pinnacle of how to build a roster in the NFL. You have a quarterback that at best is average. Surround him with a lot of dudes, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, the entire offensive line. They lost Jason Kelsey, who's going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, and they didn't skip a beat. You surround him with all the talent in the world. They're elite at just about every single position outside of maybe tight end. But if you don't think they're elite at tight end, they're really, really good at tight end. They're not bad. They're not average. They're not just good. They're really good at tight end to borderline elite. So you surround an average quarterback with all the talent in the world. Washington has the slight leg up in that conversation long-term because Jayden Daniels is very clearly a lot more than average, and he's a lot better than Jalen Hurts. I do not care what list you want to put in front of me. There have already been several that have had Jalen Hurts above Jayden Daniels. I am not falling for it. There's this trend going around on social media right now. Max, maybe you've seen this. Maybe it's just a TikTok thing. Maybe I'm on a weird side of TikTok. But the trend is propaganda that I am not falling for. And an example of propaganda that I'm not falling for in the year of our Lord 2025 is any conversation of Jalen Hurts being better than Jayden Daniels. It is just not accurate. He just is surrounded with a ton of talent on offense. And then you flip to defense, and they got a Super Bowl championship without blitzing. I cannot stress this enough. When I have conversations with fans of ours about the NFC Championship game last year, because I am in agreement that there are certain plays that would have made that game a lot more easy to stomach for those of us that are fans of the Commanders and a lot easier to point to and say this was closer than the scoreboard actually related it to be, which is why, by the way, I don't believe what Florio was saying here about someone thinking they were going to get their ass kicked. There are plays that you can point to say this should have been closer than it appeared on the scoreboard. That is a fact. What is also a fact is that Washington's defense cannot hang. It could not hang last year. Philadelphia literally won a Super Bowl without blitzing. Do you understand the amount of dominance you have to have on the defensive line to literally not blitz? Because at the end of the season, it felt like constantly we were crying that Washington needed to blitz more to get pressure on quarterbacks. And even when they were blitzing, sending 5, sometimes 6, usually with 6 they got home. But with 5, you weren't getting home still. Philadelphia had the ability with just 4 to get home and to get home against the greatest quarterback of this generation in Patrick Mahomes. That is the difference. And that's why I'm so upset that Washington really has not addressed the defensive line in ways that I thought they would. Right now, I'd looked at something over the weekend on Pro Football Focus, which Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus is going to join us in 30 minutes time. It was ranking the best interior defensive tackles. You know who is not on that list? Daron Payne. Anyone on the Washington staff or roster, to be fair. John Allen was on that list. Daron Payne was not on that list. Johnny Newton was not on that list. So of the 32 best at the position, Washington, at least according to Pro Football Focus, has none of them. You got to get better at that position. I'm upset that they didn't. I don't believe that what Florida was saying and that they were going to get their ass kicked, and they knew they were going to get their ass kicked, but I do believe that they have a lot longer and a lot more of a distance to cover to be able to say that they're on the same playing field as Philadelphia. You have to be able to get after the passer, and they cannot do that yet. Eric Edholm, NFL.com. He joins us next. Don't go anywhere. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Dende. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on a Monday, starting your week off. We're headed to the phones now, continuing discussion of the NFL and its offseason. Our guy, Eric Edholm, NFL.com, is good enough to join us here. Eric, first and foremost, man, hope you're doing well. Always great to catch up. One of the reasons that I wanted to have you on, one, I like talking to you, but two, you put out a list last week ranking the top 10 rosters, and Washington not a part of that list. So I'm curious, before we get into your top 10 rosters, when you're looking at the overall top to bottom roster for the Commanders, what are you seeing when you're putting these rankings together?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Throwing me right on the grill this morning. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, it's funny. Like before I sort of went into the nuts and bolts of it, I kind of assumed they'd end up somewhere in the back end of the top 10. And for those who haven't seen it, basically what I did is I tried my best to rate every position, apples to apples across the league. Who has the best position groups, and it took longer than I thought. And then just try to weigh it. I had a personnel guy a few years back kind of say that they weighed offense, if it was on a scale of 10, offense represented 5 parts, defense 4, special teams 1. That was just one equation I got. So as I sort of punched the numbers in, I realized that Commanders rated pretty low as far as defensive line, secondary, overall defense. I mean, I like their linebackers, and I think there's some impact players at the other spots. But just again, when you stack it up against the league, I mean, Jaden Daniels is great. There's no doubt they have supported him with a better offensive line. They've added weapons, but they came out, I think, 11th or tied for 11th, really close. They and the Rams were the ones who just outside the list, and so I almost tried to redo it. I was like, is this the right way to do it? But that certainly doesn't mean that, my methodology is perfect or that I'm correct on my assessments of who's better than who. But it was interesting. I kind of figured they'd end up somewhere in the 7 to 10 range, and they were just outside that.
So I'm glad you mentioned where they fell in the 11th or 12th, because I was going to ask, was this one of those things where you do have like a full list of 32 and only the top 10 were published, but so you did have them right on the outside looking in of the top 10?
Yeah, and part of it was like, I think Bill Parcells said it best, like, don't tell me about the birth, just show me the baby, right? I didn't want to get too lost in all the, my editors asked for 10 teams who have the 10 best rosters. I wanted to explain a little bit how I did it in the intro, and I did just that, but people rightfully are saying, how are the 49ers in there? How are you, after they lost a lot, after coming off a 6-11 season, how did they end up there? And look, it's possible I overrated them. Maybe my view of them is, last year was an aberration. They're actually better than you think, and they're getting all these guys back from injury, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I'm putting them too far ahead. Maybe I've got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, ahead of, a team that Washington beat in Tampa in the playoffs. Let's not forget that. But, it's just going to be fascinating to see. I was so impressed with what Adam Peters did in year one. Mm-hmm. And I think they made some really smart targeted additions this year, at the cost of some draft picks this year and next. That's going to be interesting to see what the long-term effects are. It's a multi-tiered thing. You got to think about free agency and contracts and winning during Jaden's rookie contract and all that. But I really can't complain about too much they've done the last, 18, 20 months. It's been fun to see this team build up the way it has. And I think they'll absolutely be in contention if that defense is competitive at all. That's how good they are, I think, with a quarterback and head coach for that matter. I think the staff is great too.
So you mentioned the defensive line, and if you're going to criticize the defensive line, I will be on the front lines with you. I've spent the last 30 minutes doing so because I think they need to be better. But when you're stacking their defensive line up against other teams in the NFL, what were some of the things that were like really jumping out to you about how Washington's falls short?
Yeah, I think obviously if you think Johnny Newman could step up and fill a role, and Javon Kinlaw and Payne and all those guys, I don't know what to make of, like a guy like Eddie Goldman or anything like that. But I would say that the weakest spots are probably outside. I think that's really the lack of sort of true pass rush threats there, especially in a division where there are lots of them. Again, that doesn't necessarily always mean that much, but still, I mean, you see the formula that's worked for Philadelphia, no question about it. The Giants adding Abdul Carter to an already strong defensive line. Dallas has Micah Parsons, maybe the singular best guy at what he does. So, it's a tough contrast there, even if, again, it only matters whether the Commanders can block those guys and whether their pass rushers can have success against the offensive lines. But still, again, just from a compare and contrast situation, I think the lack of edge rush talent concerns me a little bit. Again, secondary, I would also say is an area that I really like Trey Amos, but counting on any rookie cornerback to step right in and be great. Just look at the Lions with Terry and Arnold. He went through some growing pains until playing better later in the year. You can find other examples of rookie corners. Obviously, Emmanuel Forbes would be a good one to start with a couple years ago. It doesn't always work out that way, even if I think he's a really good prospect for the long term.
So when you look across the teams in the top of the league, obviously Philadelphia was one on this list. What is the gap between them and everybody else in the NFL in terms of the roster construction?
Yeah, I think it's not as big as everybody thinks. I mean, they lose Milt Williams, they lose Josh Sweat. What has amazed me is their long-term vision and the ability to draft essentially 2 and 3 years ahead of time, to understand that these guys are going to be not necessarily instant impact performers always. Some of them will, but Philly's done a great job of realizing, hey, okay, in 2025, we're going to have some defensive linemen in free agency. Let's plan ahead and start drafting D linemen in 2022, 2023, et cetera. So that when those situations arise, we don't feel completely compelled to re-sign the guys unless we absolutely want to. So it gives them flexibility and options, and I think that's reflected in their talent. I don't know that there's a position on their team where you go, ooh, that's in pretty rough shape. I think that's the difference, that their weakest positions are still, I think, in most cases, at least middle of the road. So, do they have luck with injury? That's obviously going to be a question. Do these young defensive linemen step up? That's obviously something that hasn't been completely proven yet. But again, I would just say the lack of glaring weaknesses is probably what defines their strength as much as anything.
Is Jalen Carter the best defensive tackle in the NFL?
He might be. I mean, yeah, at this stage of his career, obviously you could think about a guy like Chris Jones, who's done it for a long time. Aaron Donald obviously held the mantle for many years. But there is, I think, a shift in this league. And, what may have held him back a little bit was the fact that they were kind of controlling his snaps a little bit to a certain degree. Like sometimes you'd see him play 32 snaps in a game, but when you're getting a sack and a half and a forced fumble and earning double teams and things like that, your impact is justified. So as he's gotten more opportunities, you've seen the player blossom. There were obviously questions about some maturity stuff coming out in college, but the Eagles said, we trust our locker room. We think he's that good. And they were right. And, we'll see this season. This will be a big test. He will obviously face a ton of attention inside, but if he's not one, he's not much lower than 2 or 3.
Eric Edholm with us here, NFL.com, covers the league in all aspects. When is Aaron Rodgers going to sign with Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's sitting back and sipping on one of his little, vintage tequila blends or whatever, and enjoying the attention. And look, I don't know what his timetable is. I don't know what his motivation is with this. But the interview with McAfee a month ago or whatever kind of suggests, or a month and a half maybe now, he basically alluded to the fact that he had some personal stuff going on. And, I don't ever want to make light of that. Aaron's obviously a quirky guy and a difficult guy to read sometimes. And I think he enjoys being that. I think he likes the mystery and likes people guessing. But I also think there may actually be a tangible reason why he's held back. I don't love the idea of a quarterback just deciding, all right, I'll show up at training camp and all's good. I mean, you think about the commitment that so many quarterbacks have to make year round, building chemistry with receivers, diving into the X's and O's of the offense, figuring out plays and situations with the coordinator, just going over stuff with the other quarterbacks in the room. I mean, there's a chemistry to be built there, and that hasn't really happened outside of a 1 hour workout at UCLA with DK Metcalf. So I don't know. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers' lack of panic with this situation kind of reflects what we're all thinking. He's probably just going to end up there at some point, and that'll be that. But it hasn't happened yet. And at some point, they've got to figure out, is Mason Rudolph ready? Is Will Howard going to step in at some point? Do they have another option? Is Kirk Cousins on the table? I don't know. So I still feel like it's probably going to happen. But, man, the more time that goes on, the more surprised I guess I am.
A question that I never thought I would ask another human being, but I'm going to ask you this. In 2025, would you rather have Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins?
Oh, my goodness. That's and I like Kirk. I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I think he's kind of gotten a bad rap over his career for certain things. I mean, he can throw the football, but I think what really hurt him last year was the Achilles injury. Now, let's point out the fact that, in a short week, he threw for 510 yards. So he still can throw the football, but I think the lack of mobility really did hurt him. Obviously there's some connections. I know Arthur Smith wasn't there when Cousins was there, but knows people on staff who could probably give him an idea of what Cousins is capable of. I think if they preferred him, they would have gone after him. They would have at least made some overtures or hinted that he could be an option. It's been very faint so far. So I'm kind of with the Steelers on this one, I think, as I read it. I would probably rather have Rodgers, but it's a strange question. I think it's fair to ask.
It's one of the only times throughout the history of both guys' careers where I think it's fair to ask, but I would agree with you in that I think would probably lean Aaron Rodgers. Just a few more here for Eric Edholm, who joins us here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day, sitting in for Kevin. So last year, Eric, Jaden Daniels took the league by storm. The year before that, it was C.J. Stroud taking the year by storm as rookie quarterbacks. Do you think any of the rookies this year have the capability of taking the league by storm?
Yeah, not to the level I think that those guys did. Cam Ward has the ability to be a good quarterback in this league. I always question whether he could be a great one. Watching him, I thought there were flashes of greatness and then flashes of sort of frustrating, sort of ineffectiveness that he would sometimes sort of force his way into. But there were times where I felt that about Jaden too, watching him in college. There were some limitations I felt like in his game. Even if I loved him coming out, I really thought that all three of those top guys were going to be very good players, and still feel that way. I still, I'm back in Caleb May, and I'm back in Drake May and Caleb Williams, but I don't feel the same level of conviction that I do with those guys. From what I hear, Shedur's doing everything he can to prove that he's going to get a shot in Cleveland. Dylan Gabriel's been off to a little bit of a slow start, but again, it's OTAs. It's hard to know. I don't know that there's that one that just really stands out. Probably I would say that the one, Cam has the best chance because he's going to start early in the year, if not week one, most likely going to be the opening day starter. And they're going to try to build the offense around him. And Brian Callahan had success with Joe Burrow and Cincy and might be able to have similar results. Although I just don't know if the ceiling's quite as high as it is for Joe or other quarterbacks.
Do you think both in New York, do you think both Jameis and Russell Wilson are going to be on that Giants roster week one?
Yeah, both of them. That's a fair question. I don't know. I don't know how to handle that. It's neither one of them is being paid a king's ransom. So I think there's at least a possibility to justify keeping both, especially if you feel like, okay, Russ is the starter until the wheels fall off or Jackson Dart proves he's ready. And then Jameis is our number two. Like he's our all-time backup, right? Like you always had the all-time quarterback in the side yard. Maybe ends up in that role. And it's a little bit of a weird structure. And I'd love to be a fly on that QB room wall, but some interesting personalities in that room. But, yeah, that's a good question. I think there's at least a chance that they decide, okay, Jameis is extra weight. We don't need him. We think Jackson's come a long ways. Or we feel like Russell's still got, a good season left in him. So yeah, that's a fair question to raise. They had a good draft. They had everything but Dart is the one that, if he hits, that takes a very good class to an exceptional one.
All right, Eric, I'll get you out of here on this. Obviously, nothing's set in stone here, so we're not going to hold your feet to the fire too much with this one. But as we approach training camp, is there one team that you're looking at as kind of being this dark horse, whether it be in the NFC or AFC?
Yeah, that's a good one too. I would say don't forget about the Arizona Cardinals. They're kind of a team that sometimes they were 6-4 and had kind of in the driver's seat for that division. Sort of felt like they're on the come. I could see them being a team that surprised some people. I think again the Buccaneers are a team that maybe isn't being considered a Super Bowl contender, that maybe should get some of that praise. There's nobody right off the top of my head that's just like screaming comeback season or something like. Again, I think the 49ers are going to bounce back from 6-11. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you look at their schedule, it's very manageable. And if you look at the players they're getting back from injury, yes, it doesn't make up for all their losses, but I do think they're going to be a team that bounces back this season. Also keep an eye on the Jaguars. I still am not convinced that the Travis Hunter move is the right move long term, but doesn't mean it's not going to add talent right away, and they have a pretty manageable schedule themselves.
Yeah, they got some sneaky talent on that offense as well.
Yeah.
Eric, appreciate the time as always, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
All right, have a good morning. See you.
That is Eric Edholm. I guess he's in Chicago, so it's still the morning. Look at me being dumb.
It's 11:18. It's still morning here.
It's morning here too, so it's morning literally everywhere in the country, and I'm saying afternoon. You know what? That is how it is.
Well, you're up at 4 a.m. every day. This is afternoon for you.
Basically is my afternoon. Max Chadwick is going to join us in about 20 minutes. He's been a part of some of the Pro Football Focus listings that have left guys like Daron Payne off and on the cutting room floor at certain positions. So I'm really excited to get into that conversation. I do just want to mention something that Eric had alluded to. He mentioned the Cardinals in the NFC West. I think there's been so much attention paid to the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams rightfully so because of how good they were at the end of last year. And then assuming that Matthew Stafford is going to continue to be a top-tier, top-level quarterback. I don't know that I am as bullish on the Rams, admittedly, Max, as everybody else is, because I don't know that I trust Matt Stafford at, I think he's like 37 now.
Yeah, he's getting up there.
He's getting up there in age, and it's not normal for guys to be as effective at quarterbacks. So he just turned 37. So he just turned 37. I don't know that I'm going to trust a guy that just turned 37 to perform the way that he did last year. Now, they did help him with adding Devontae Adams, so I still think there's some gas left in that tank. And Puka Nacua has been a really good wide receiver, but I'm a little less in on the Rams as everybody else. With that said, I'm not saying I'm in on the Cardinals. I'm not saying that at all. I have about 8 years of Kyler Murray showing me that
thank you.
He's really good for about 8 weeks.
Thank you.
And then not very good for the second half.
Video games come out mid-season. It happens.
Well, it's not even video games. It's the fact that he's like 5'6".
Listen,
eventually you're going to have to see over your line of scrimmage. And if you can't do that, things are going to be very difficult to play quarterback. So that has always been the Achilles heel. It was never Cliff. Cliff was blamed for it. It was never Cliff. It was the fact that you just cannot make Kyler Murray grow without using a lot of roids and HGHs and things that are very illegal as far as the NFL is concerned. All right, Max Chadwick coming up in 15 minutes rather. Coming up next, a little bit of Denton's Daily News, including a quarterback getting married in the NFL. Don't go anywhere. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin on a Monday. Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus, is going to join us in about 15 minutes here on the program. Get his thoughts on some of the guys that need to be better for Washington in 2025. Max also covers college football, so we'll talk a little bit of college football with Max. Ben Standing coming up at noon here on the show, as he does each and every Monday. Before we get to Max, let's get to some daily news. So first, we're going to start with the congratulations, Max. We are going to congratulate Josh Allen, quarterback,
Yes.
Buffalo Bills, marrying Haley Steinfeld this weekend. I am a big fan of Haley Steinfeld. I have still yet to see Sinners, but I love the Pitch Perfect franchise, and Pitch Perfect 2 is a great sequel. That's actually the first movie I think that I ever saw Haley Steinfeld in. I'm trying to
Really?
I believe so. I'm not a massive movie guy, so I think that was the first movie that I ever saw her in.
Ender's Game. Did you ever see that?
I have never heard of that.
Okay. It was a book. It turned into a movie. It was about like this kid, he's super gifted and all that. So he gets put in this war school and they run him through all these simulations, and then boom, you find out the simulations were actually war battles. So and then they win the war and they take out the planet and all that. But Haley Steinfeld is in it, and she's like, I think they're both like 14. So I think that was, and that came out when I was in middle school. So I think that was my first intro to her.
Interesting. Okay. So she gets married to Josh Allen. And the reason I know about this is because I have seen pictures of this. Now, it wasn't professionally done pictures. It was instead paparazzi pictures. That's the worst.
They are
the
scum of the
absolute worst, because how do they get there? And what I believe is the case is that they flew drones. As someone that just got married, if I were to have seen a drone over my wedding, it would have been a problem for somebody. I don't know who, but it would have been a problem for somebody. I cannot imagine having this incredibly special moment with you, your multi-million-dollar quarterback, and Josh Allen, and then like hearing just the bzzz because a drone is flying over the place. And generally there's this rule of thumb. I don't know how often people follow this, but amongst the younger generation, it was very important for my wife. You should not be posting a picture of the bride until the bride posts a picture of herself.
Correct.
That is the way that pictures are done, because you want the bride to be the first one to post a picture of herself in the wedding dress. Not everybody followed that rule at my wedding, but we got over it, right? But it was something we talked about. It was like, don't everyone go posting pictures. So the fact that Haley Steinfeld didn't get that opportunity because some, I don't know, National Enquirer, Daily Mail, whatever the Page 6, whatever the paparazzi sites are.
As Doc Walker would put it, a jackass.
A jackass decided to fly a drone over the wedding. Congratulations to those two. I'm sure the wedding looks beautiful. That was also one thing. When you fly a drone, you don't get like the great look of what the venue actually was. So it looks like they got married in a backyard. I know it wasn't. They got a lot of money. And I'm sure like planning a wedding, Josh Allen and Haley Steinfeld, I guarantee was a lot easier for them than it was for me and my wife, because they had an ability that me and my wife did not have, which is a $55 million contract per year. Go pay somebody to figure this stuff out.
How much are flowers? 30,000, sir. Sure, man.
That's it?
I don't care.
Which, by the way, that price, not terribly off. It is off a little bit,
say,
but not terribly off. I mean, some of the things that they upcharge you for on weddings are just absolutely insane. So Josh Allen could just say, I just got a new contract. Somebody go figure it out. All right. Next on the daily news here, I did mention this early. John Brankus passed away this morning.
Sucks.
John Brankus was the host and I believe founder and owner of Sports Science. I loved watching Sports Science on ESPN when I was younger. I think it was in its prime, or like on ESPN from 2007 to 2017. It was on Fox, I believe, before then, or maybe it was on Fox for part of 2007 to 17, but I know for a majority of its run, it was on ESPN. And Sports Science was like the craziest program in the world, Max, as I'm sure you know, because it was like the most random things that you would get legitimate science on. And my favorite was after the 2011 NBA Finals, when the Dallas Mavericks beat Miami and Dirk went crazy. There was a whole episode dedicated, or a whole segment rather, dedicated to Dirk Nowitzki's shot, that fadeaway that he did that basically won the Mavericks a championship. And because of his height and because of the way that he did the fadeaway with lifting of the knee and creating space and separation between him and the defender and lifting the knee in a way that was a basketball move, rather than, it seems like most times in the NBA, if you see somebody hit a fadeaway, it's more in line with a step back jumper than like an actual fadeaway. But because he would lift his knee with an actual fadeaway, you got all these like scientific metrics that said that shot is virtually unblockable. Like John Brankus got on there and said, you would have had to be the height of Yao Ming and the leaping ability of Derrick Rose to block that shot. And I remember me in like, I guess that was 2011. So I was in high school, just being like completely in awe of how that worked. And you know what I did? I went out there and I practiced that shot in my driveway. And you know what happened, Max? My dad blocked it immediately. So I clearly wasn't doing something correctly. But like just those sorts of things. And like this Brandon Jacobs episode where John Brankus, who was not like an athlete, I don't think, not a big time athlete, at least beforehand, basically just sat there and got trucked by Brandon Jacobs. And it looked like he literally just signing up to be in a car crash.
Well, it's not even the first time that he did that, because he got slammed by Luke Kuechly too.
The guy was nuts, but he did it for us. He was nuts and putting his body through all sorts. Like, I don't want to get tackled by Luke Kuechly. I don't want to tackle Brandon Jacobs. I don't want to tackle anybody, let alone Brandon Jacobs. But by far the most memorable one is not the Dirk one, even though that was my favorite. It was not Kevin Love body slamming a sumo wrestler when Kevin Love had a buzz cut to work on rebounding. It was instead this episode. I don't know what the guy's name was. Honestly, I don't think it's particularly relevant. But it was this one episode where they brought this guy in, and his specialty was getting kicked in the nuts. So they bring this guy in that has made a lifetime of getting kicked in the nuts. And at like 12, I was like, this is not real. Like, this is insane television. And they brought in a professional kickboxer, and they wanted to see the amount of force that they could kick this dude in the nuts with, and he would just take it. And they bring in like this world champion kickboxer, and let me tell you, he leveled my man. Like just absolute leg fully to the crotch. And they measured it with, whatever sort of scientific stuff they utilize, cameras, angles, all these things. And they measured it at like, I don't know if it was like PSIs or just like pounds of force per square inch, whatever it was. But it was effectively about 1,300 pounds of force to the nuts. And the guy just took it. It was the most, I was like, first of all, who checked off on this? Even in high school, I was like, who checked off on getting this guy kicked in the nuts like this? But like, that's the kind of show that it was. So I feel terrible for the Brankus family. It was allegedly a battle with depression, which it's tough out. Like, text your homies, man. We see these videos of Mike Sanders still calling his homies, tell them good night. Text your homies good night, especially if you're a man out there. Text your fellas. Let them know that you're thinking about them and that you love them. And then finally, here before we get to Max Chadwick, does the Madden curse still exist?
I hope so.
Because Saquon Barkley just made the cover of Madden. It felt like there was a while where the Madden curse stopped existing. But then last year, Christian McCaffrey was on the cover of Madden, and Christian McCaffrey did not play very well. There were some people on Twitter that were fans of our organization that said they wanted Jaden Daniels on the cover of Madden.
No,
not me. Not old D-Day over here. I did not want to see Jaden Daniels on that Madden cover. Even if the Madden curse doesn't exist anymore, I lived through enough of the Madden curse to know that I don't want any burgundy and gold on the cover of Madden. Point blank, period. Jaden was awesome. The Hail Mary was the play of the season this year. He was the player of the season as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, Lamar was great. Josh Allen was great. But for me, the season was all about Jaden Daniels, and I don't want him anywhere near that shoot for the Madden cover. I don't need to see him on Madden. I mean, I'll see him on Madden, but I don't want to see him on the cover of Madden. It was Saquon Barkley doing the hurdle over what's-his-face. Sick. Have fun with that. No Jaden Daniels, please. No Madden cover for us here.
Rather see Peyton Hillis on the cover.
I don't know where Peyton Hillis is in life. I'll see Peyton Hillis. You want to get a DC defender? Put a DC defender out there. I don't want to see no Jane Daniels, no Terry, Brian Wright, like nobody
on the cover.
I don't want to see nobody in the burgundy and gold on the Madden cover. But congratulations to Saquon. Have fun with all that, Philadelphia fans. You've earned it. All right, when we get back, Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus, he joins us on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton sitting in on the Team 980.
All right, well, as you just heard, EA Sports makes it official. Saquon Barkley will be the cover athlete of Madden 26. The Offensive Player of the Year threatened to break Eric Dickerson's all-time rushing record, notching over 2,000 yards in 16 games last season. The Nats, they fell yesterday to the Arizona Diamondbacks by a score of 3-1. The Nats are 10-4 in their last 14 games. Will begin their series versus the Chicago Cubs tomorrow at 6:45. The NBA Finals are set. The Indiana Pacers finish off the New York Knicks over the weekend, 125-108. They will face the Oklahoma City Thunder starting on Thursday. And sports fans around the world are grieving today after it was announced in a Facebook post that sports science host John Brinkus passed away following a bout with depression. The mastermind of sports minutia was very open regarding his mental health struggles, and his family has urged those who struggle with similar afflictions to seek help. He was 54. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1, and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. We'll head out to the phones here. Welcome on Max Chadwick to the program, Pro Football Focus. You can find him on Twitter at CFB Max Chadwick. Max, first and foremost, man, appreciate you jumping on, making some time for us here on a Monday morning. There's a couple things I wanted to get into, but I wanted to just start with the Commanders and their overall roster grade. I know PFF put together a roster grade they ranked the rosters rather of every team in the NFL last week. Washington came in at number 11. When you just look at a broad view of Washington's roster, what sticks out to you?
Yeah, obviously, I think last year they overperformed a lot, right? I think a lot of it had to do with Jaden Daniels coming in and having, one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen from a quarterback. But by all stretches, it was still one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and the supporting cast still wasn't the best for Jaden Daniels either. So it just even shows even more how much of a superstar he can be in the NFL with how good he was in leading Washington all the way to the NFC title game this past year. I think they improved the supporting cast a lot this offseason, obviously trading for an all-pro left tackle, Laramie Tunsil, getting Deebo Samuel into that receiver room as well, drafting Josh Connolly Jr. in the first round as well, too. So they definitely improved the supporting cast a lot. The defense is still going to be a little bit of a question mark. I like some of the moves they did on that side of the ball as well. But, yeah, I think Washington, roster-wise, even though they made it all the way to the NFC title game, it's still probably not one of the elites in the NFL. But when you have an elite quarterback like Jaden Daniels, that can make up for a lot of the deficiencies in your roster.
Defensive line is a position group that we have had many passionate conversations about on this particular station. I don't think that they are very good on the defensive line. What do you see when you look at them?
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually, as good as Josh Connolly Jr. was, I'd rather prefer them maybe go after one of the top edge rushers in this past NFL draft with that first-round pick. And they didn't do it. And I think Josh Connolly Jr. is a really good player who should be, maybe not start immediately for Washington, but he'll be a long-term starter eventually down the road for them. But, yeah, that defensive line, like you said, D tackle's not great. Edge rusher was rough last year as well. It doesn't look great for next year. And I was a big fan of Drazon Newton coming out of Illinois a couple of years ago out of college, and I thought he was a steal on day 2 of the draft, and I thought he should have been a first-round pick. So I think, in year 2, maybe you could see a big jump from him, but he wasn't great in his rookie year. And then, Javon Kinlaw has struggled his entire career. Don't love the contract he got. Deron Payne is just an okay player, I thought, as well. And then obviously the edge room with Dorrance Armstrong and Deatrick Wise is probably one of the worst in the NFL. So I still think that defensive line for Washington should be one of the worst in the NFL next year. And you're hoping for a year 2 breakout for Drazon Newton.
What does Johnny Newton have to do to overtake Deron Payne as the defensive tackle 1 in that room?
Yeah, I think get a little stronger against the run. I think, I was watching his tape from this past season, he just kind of got washed out of plays too much. And it makes sense, going from the college to the NFL, where the linemen are bigger and stronger and more technically sound. It can be harder to defend the run than it obviously was in college. But get a little stronger and more stout against the run is what I would say for Drazon Newton. I think as a pass rusher, you definitely saw some flashes from him last year. But I definitely want to see him get, a little more bullish at the point of attack where he could get into the backfield.
Max Chadwick with us here on the Kevin Sheehan Show from Pro Football Focus. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin. Where is Deebo Samuel going to be used in this offense, do you think?
Everywhere. I think that's the best thing for him. Is you just use him all over the offense, and Cliff Kingsbury can get very creative with him in his offense. So I'm excited to see what his usage is. But he's a guy that is just a weapon. Calling a wide receiver, he is a wide receiver, but he's just really a weapon in that offense. You give him carries out of the backfield, screens, design touches, even some downfield throws too. So I'm just excited to see what he could do in this offense. It's kind of a different element of a receiver than what they already have in Terry McLaurin.
So when you look across the NFL, Philadelphia is largely considered the best team in the NFL. In the NFC in particular, who would you say is second to Philly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd probably still say Detroit right now. I think that's probably the team I would still put up there as maybe the next best team in the conference. Now, I think there is a question mark with the Lions, considering they lost both their coordinators to head coaching jobs. So they have to replace both coordinators, who both were star coordinators, obviously, in Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. So that's definitely a question mark there. But roster-wise, it's still one of the best rosters, I should say, in the NFL. You bring back Aiden Hutchinson from injury, who hopefully can bounce back to what he was, because what he was last year, he was looking like the defensive player of the year before he went down with that injury. And then offensively, you got, really good offensive line, a good receiving core. Jared Goff is at least an above-average quarterback, a great run game as well. And then, there's a lot of young pieces in that defense I'm a big fan of too. So there is a question mark with the new coaching staff, but I do think Detroit right now is probably the next best team after Philadelphia.
How much longer, and this is the final NFL question before we get to some college football stuff, because there's a lot we got to talk about there. But how much longer do you think Kansas City sits atop of the mountain in the AFC, or do you think they have finally reached the point where they're a little too old at certain positions?
Honestly, as long as they have number 15 back there under center, I'm never going to say the Chiefs are ever out of it in the AFC. I mean, listen, Patrick Mahomes has started 7 years in the NFL, and all 7 years he's been to at least the AFC title game, right? So who am I to say it's going to end in 2025? Now, I agree with you. Their roster is getting a little bit older. Travis Kelce did look like he lost a step last year. But, I think they're hoping to find some new weapons. I mean, obviously, Rashee Rice coming back from his injury from last year and still is looming off-field issues too. But Xavier Worthy, they drafted in the first round, hoping he can be a deep threat. He did show flashes of that last year. They made some moves on the offensive line too. We'll see what happens with that, with Josh Simmons coming in, the first-round pick. And they have some good players in defense. Obviously, the best part of the Chiefs last year, I thought, was the defense. It actually wasn't Patrick Mahomes. The defense is actually one of the best in the NFL, and it should remain that going into next year too. So as long as Andy Reid's coaching, as long as Patrick Mahomes is throwing the football, the Kansas City Chiefs are absolutely going to be in the thick of it in the AFC.
Max Chadwick, my guest here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton sitting in. You can find him on Twitter at CFB Max Chadwick. Let's transition to college football, Max. It's been a little busy over the last week or so. We had the SEC meetings, of course, last week, and we got word that a seeding change is likely to come in the college football playoff. Do you think that in the position that we are at right now, people are starting to make changes to the format a little too quickly in the playoff?
Yeah, it is alarming how quickly, we went from, back in, I think it was 1998, we went from just voting for a national championship to say, okay, let's do a national championship game with two teams. And that lasted for 16 years really. And then we got to a 4-team playoff, and that lasted for a decade. Now we're in a 10 to a 12-team playoff, and now it's only going to last for really 2 years, right? So it's kind of crazy how you go from a two-team system that lasted for nearly 20 years to a 4-team system that lasted for 10 years. Now a 12-team system is lasting for maybe 2 years, right? So seems like we're accelerating this a little bit too quickly, but I don't think a 16-team system is actually the worst thing in the world. I do want to stop after that, though. I don't think we should be going to a 24-team or even larger than that, because I think that would devalue the regular season a little bit, which is honestly the best part of college football. I think it's the best regular season in sports, honestly, is the college football regular season. So I think the 16-team system is interesting. I'm not against it at all. The format of it is going to be a little interesting too, because they might have more automatic bids, for 4 for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, 2 for the Big 12, 2 for the ACC, and then the rest are, at least one group of 5 team, then at large. I don't hate that model. I know they're debating a lot of different models of it as well, but I don't hate the 16-team system. But you're right, it is pretty insane that we're only going to have really maybe 2 years of the 12-team playoff before you move up to 16 teams.
Is it starting to feel like by 2030 it's just going to be Super League, Big Ten versus SEC?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it does feel like if you're not in the Big Ten or the SEC right now, you might be getting left behind a little bit. I still think obviously we still have a lot of great programs in the ACC and in the Big 12 that are going to remain right now. So I don't think we're going to ever I don't think we're going to get to that point soon where it's just going to be 2 conferences competing for it. And I would hate for that to happen too. Just getting rid of so much other great things about college football. There's more to college football than just the Big Ten and the SEC, honestly, right? So,
right.
But it does feel like a little bit like the Big Ten and SEC are kind of separating themselves a little bit from the pack. It's like, hey, we are very clearly the 2 best conferences in the sport. We deserve, priority over everyone else right now.
So I know we're a ways away from the start of the season, but I just love talking about college football. A lot of people are pointing to Drew Aller as the top quarterback entering the season. Are you in camp Drew Aller, or do you think the best quarterback is somebody else?
No, I think Aller's a top 5 quarterback in the country. I think he still has some issues with his footwork and his accuracy that make me, hesitant to call him the best quarterback in America. But I definitely would say he's a top 5 quarterback in the country. I would say the best one right now is honestly Cade Klubnik from Clemson, which I was kind of surprised. If you told me I would say that last year, I would say you're crazy. But he had an unreal year this past year. I thought he was a top 5 quarterback in the country. He was excellent in the college football playoff game against Texas, who has one of the best defenses in America as well. I was blown away by Cade Klubnik this past year. So I would say he's the best right now. And then there's some other guys that I'll throw in that mix too, like Sam Levitt from Arizona State. Drew Allard, Garrett Nussmeier, guys like that. DJ Ligo should have a big year. Arch Manning could have a really massive year at Texas. I still think Carson Beck's a really good quarterback. I think kind of Georgia's receiving core let him down a lot last year. But yeah, Drew Allard's definitely in that mix right now. There's no clear-cut answer for number one, but I would give the slight nod to Cade Klubnik right now.
Do you think South Carolina can replicate some of the success they had? It feels like they have years where they're good. We think, all right, this next year they're going to be really good, and then they fall off a little bit. Is this finally the year that Beamer puts two really, really good years together?
They could. I would say they're a very volatile team because I think Lenore Sellers, even though he's one of the most physically talented quarterbacks in America, he's very inconsistent right now. So I kind of hesitate to call him one of the best in the country like some others are doing right now too. Dylan Stewart's a freak athlete at edge rusher, right? So they have him. But I just there's a lot in that roster they lost from last year, and that defense is really the reason why they were such a good team last year. They lost a lot from that defense from last year too. So I'm a little hesitant to call them a true playoff contender right now. I think they're more of like a top 20 team in college football, and I probably won't predict them to make the playoff next year.
So you mentioned Cade Klubnik. Do you think Clemson gets back on top of the ACC as a legitimate powerhouse?
Yeah, I am all in on Clemson next year. I actually think right now they're the best team in the country. I think, Cade Klubnik, you have him as who I consider to be the top quarterback in America. You have one of the best receiving cores in college football. You have a top 10 offensive line, at least in my opinion, in college football. The best D-line in the country, in my opinion. You have one of the best linebacker units in the country and one of the best secondaries in the country. I think Clemson right now is my pick to win the national title next year for all those reasons. Yeah, I'm pretty all in on the Tigers next year.
And everybody started making fun of Dabo Swinney for not using the portal. Then he finally does, and they're going to get good again, aren't they?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, Dabo Swinney. He did add a couple players in the portal. He's still very much building his roster off of high school recruiting. But listen, when you recruit the level that Clemson does, bringing a top 5, top 10 class every single year, you're still going to be one of the top teams in college football. And they do a really good job of keeping their talent as well in that program. Like a lot of the top players, you don't really see them leaving Clemson, right? So that's another great thing that Dabo Swinney does. Do I wish he used the portal a little bit more? Probably, but he still should have one of the best rosters in the country next year with what he's done recruiting-wise.
Max, appreciate the time, man. This has been a lot of fun. I can't wait for the start of college football season. It can't get here soon enough. Appreciate you, man.
Of course. Appreciate you guys.
That is Max Chadwick, Pro Football Focus. You can find him on Twitter at CFB Max Chadwick. I always love talking college football. You guys know that. I'm a college football sicko. So anytime we can have those conversations, I'm all for it. You can get Clemson right now at most sporting books at 13-1 to win the national championship. I don't hate that at all, especially seeing as they are built from the defensive side out. That defensive line, if you look back at some of the great Clemson teams, when Dabo was at the peak of his power, if you will. I mean, Deshaun Watson led one of the teams to a national championship, obviously, but that Trevor Lawrence national championship, Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback that year, but if you look at that defensive line, good God, they were stacked with talent, NFL talent. In fact, Cleveland Farrell was on that team. Christian Wilkins, who now plays in Las Vegas, was on that team. They were just packed to the gills, built through the defensive line. So if that's the version of Clemson that we're going to get in 2025, and you can get them now at 13-1, I'm telling you what, I'm sprinkling a little bit of something on Clemson to win the national championship. We'll have more college football, obviously, as we get closer and closer to the season. Y'all know that Kevin's a sicko about it as well. When we get back, we're talking Commanders. Ben Standing is going to join us, talk a little bit about OTAs and what is next to come in the offseason for Washington. Don't go anywhere. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton sitting in for Kevin on the Team 980. This is Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the team at 980. Sheehan is back on Wednesday. It'll be Linnell in the big chair tomorrow. We head out to the phones. Our guy Ben Standig, insider for the Washington Commanders, joins us every Monday and Friday at noon here. Is kind enough to give us some time. Ben, first and foremost, appreciated as always, my friend. Anything of note happen over the weekend for Washington post OTAs, or was it just quiet on that front?
Hopefully I can say it was just quiet because I didn't notice anything otherwise. Yeah, I mean, it's, this is that time of year, obviously, where you want it to be quiet. I mean, it's bad for those of us in the content game, but it's, this is, you're supposed to be quiet at business like this time of year. Just, and it looks like that's the case. Obviously, there's still the Terry McLaurin situation. We'll see if he's out there this week or not. But, again, I'm not too worried about that at this stage. So, yeah, pretty quiet time right now.
When are you guys allowed to be out there this week?
I think we're back out there Wednesday.
So you might get to see Terry McLaurin out there. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, if he's there, I'm sure I said this probably last time, or you've had others say this, but like, I don't, to me, wake me up if we get, to past mini camp and still nothing's been done, or maybe more specifically, we get close to training camp and nothing's been done. But I expect them to come up with a deal. Negotiations are always can be tricky, and we're talking about a lot of money here. But again, look at the whole situation, and I just imagine that at some point here something gets done.
I know that Connerly is signed. Have all of the rookies signed their contracts?
I don't think the team has announced that, right? Which is, surprising yet not surprising. I mean, it's it's not the biggest deal, and I think the one interesting thing is, like, I think with the second round picks, because there were some players who signed for fully guaranteed contracts as second round picks, which is unusual. So I think that there may be some trickle down with that, but they haven't announced anything yet that I'm aware of. But again, this is all these contracts are basically boilerplate kind of stuff minus some language, so I would just imagine they'll get it done. But yeah, I have not seen anything officially yet.
Right, especially if they're all there, so we know that there's nothing wonky happening like we've seen in years past. Although it's been a long time, I think, since we've seen rookies kind of in a weird wonky spot with their contracts. Were there any names of the post June 1 cuts that caught your attention?
Feel free to throw some at me, but nothing that comes to mind.
There was CJ Mosley was a name where probably 40 years ago I think would be really intriguing, but with Bobby Wagner and Louisville, you're like, no. Aaron Rodgers, no. Justin Tucker was cut solely for football reasons, according to the Ravens. That was the only reason. He just wasn't good at football. I was a little bummed. I mean, Shaq Thompson was one of them as well. There weren't a lot of defensive end or defensive linemen that were on that list.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that stuff is typically baked into the conversation, weeks back, because it's, you usually know about these things well ahead of June 1. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think there was anything out there that was of note. And, do I see them signing some vet, whether it's an edge rusher or any position? Sure. I mean, it's definitely not impossible, but my guess would be that it's going to come much, much closer to training camp, if not during training camp. These vets don't want to show up for any of these things. They don't have to. The unsigned vets, they don't want to show up for OTAs or mini camp. I mean, it's sort of seems like the deal with Aaron Rodgers, not as well with Pittsburgh. Like, he's like, if I don't have to go to these things, I'm just going to wait. Because once you're under contract, you do have to go to at least the mandatory stuff. So, like I said, I imagine if there's going to be any activity, it's going to be several weeks from now, and it gives Washington a chance to, to take a longer look at what they have, whether it's new, rookies or vet or free agents they signed, or just even their own guys coming back, whether it's from injury or just see what else they've done. So, we'll see. But right now I don't anticipate any activity anytime soon.
Ben Standing with us here on the Kevin Sheehan Show, talking the Commanders OTAs, but with Denton sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. What is the level of optimism surrounding Johnny Newton this offseason now that he gets an entire offseason working with an NFL team
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a great wonder. I mean, I think we didn't ask about him last week with Dan Quinn, but we do get Joe Witt Jr. this week. We had Kingsbury last week. We get Joe Witt Jr. this week, and so hopefully that's a question that gets asked of him because, yeah, I mean, look, I think he was okay last year. I mean, it wasn't a lot of standout plays. There was a game or two, where at one point where he looked like he was being more involved. But I think the question for him is basically going to be his size. He's not the biggest defensive tackle. Double teams cause some problems, but at the same point, he had no offseason, right? I mean, he missed everything because of the two surgeries on his feet that kept him out. And, now he should have had, a full off season to be healthy, be trained, and hopefully, that's going to allow him to, be in a better position physically, athletically to take these guys on. Obviously he was a force in college and, they drafted him, for a reason. So yeah, I think that's going to be a big deal. I'm still fascinated though to see like, what's the rotation here? You bring in a guy like Eddie Goldman to help out, with the run defense, but does that mean he's in on early downs? If so, then what does that mean for Johnny Newton / Deron Payne? And then you got Javon Kinlaw. I know he may be playing some on the edge, but he's going to play defensive tackle as well. How do you fit that in? So I think that's all going to be interesting. I would imagine, though, that Johnny Newton, as much as anybody, other than maybe Deron Payne, is going to get the best opportunity to play as much as he possibly can. I mean, because he's the future, more than the rest of them. So yeah, I think he's definitely going to be somebody to keep an eye on. And just lastly on that, I think if Payne, we talked about this previously, if Payne can treat this like he's going to his contract year like he did in 2022, and Newton can step up, like this may be how they offset not having dynamic edge talent. Is if those guys up the middle make the plays, but we'll see.
How realistic do you think that is for Deron Payne? Like, is there a number in mind, maybe statistically, that would keep him after this year? Or does it feel like he's on the track to be what John Allen was, which is thank you for your time here. We'll try and land you in a good spot. If not, you're going to hit the open market.
Yeah. I mean, this is, this sort of, football salary cap 101 kind of stuff. Like, this year you can't do anything. His cap number is, just too big and whatever. Right. But next year it gets much more manageable, and they'll have to make a call. Like his, the dead money situation is the thing. The cap number will still be something, but the dead money drops down significantly. So yeah, I mean, I would think he's kind of tracking the way John Allen did, but this is where the Johnny Newton conversation comes into play. This is where Javon Kinlaw comes into play. And Deron Payne himself, they can tear up the last year of a deal and renegotiate and give him an extension. And, if there's reason to, that would be, I'm sure, great for all involved. But like, it's not like he's been bad the last couple of years since he signed that contract. It's just he hasn't been the impact player that we saw in 2022, that we see with guys just in their own division, Dexter Lawrence, Carter up in Philadelphia. Like, where's that guy? I mean, it's not like the Eagles even have like the most dynamic defensive end, but when you have a guy, guys up the middle who command a lot of attention, that frees things up for the edge guys. So I think all that's a huge factor. But yeah, we'll see. We haven't talked to Deron Payne yet. I don't know where his head's at, or if he's thinking about it in the terms that we are or not. But yeah, that would be huge for this defense if he's able to, find that extra special form that we saw a couple years ago.
Yeah, having a legit game record makes everything a lot easier on the defensive side, and he has not been that since he got the contract. You mentioned Javon Kinlaw potentially kicking out to play edge at least a little bit. I know Kevin has mentioned this a couple of times, but, getting to see him a little bit at OTAs last week, does he have the size and athleticism to make the transition from D tackle to defensive end, do you think?
Yeah, I wish last week was weird because we were in the bubble. We only got to see somewhat limited activity because we were sort of pushed into like a corner, and some of the linemen were at different ends of the field. But look, he's a hulking guy like that. That's even for football players. That's not an understatement. He's a huge guy, and if he's healthy, look, I mean, he was a first-round pick. Adam Peters was part of that group that drafted him in the first round in 2020. He was obviously the primary decision maker this time to bring him in for a contract that I think surprised a lot of us. So he obviously is a believer. And, I think, Dan Quinn's had in previous defensive schemes, a guy who plays the elephant position, which is more or less just a defensive end who's focused primarily on the run, just for lack of, for simplicity. So, I can see that. And again, we know that the defensive end room is not exactly, this isn't Dexter Manley and Charles Mann, man of the edges, who is going to be out there, or, even more recently, Montez Sweat, Chase Young. So, I think there's an opportunity to play a guy like that. The run defense, obviously, last year was a mess. So, if they think that's something they can, that'll help them a lot, combined with like Dietrich Wise on one side and Dorrance Armstrong. And then, they can manufacture pass rushing as they did last year. I think that could absolutely work. But, we'll have to see how this goes. It's, it almost feels like it's just too early to ask a lot of, questions about like scheme. I mean, they're hesitant to answer a lot of these things anyway. But, I think they're still just sort of sorting it all out. But, yeah, I'm sure we'll ask Joe Witt about, hey, Javon Kinlaw, what's your, first impression? What are your general ideas? How do you guys look to use him, et cetera? So, I think he's absolutely one of the big question marks for the season, and potentially a helpful solution to that run defense and just give them another body after losing John Allen.
Have you heard anything from inside the organization? We're talking with Ben Standig here, The Athletic, on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton sitting in for Kevin. I should have led with this one, Ben, but have you heard anything from inside the organization in terms of pushback to some of the comments that Mike Florio made about them knowing they were going to get walloped in the NFC Championship game?
I haven't. I'll be honest. I didn't even see that. Was that from last week?
It was from last week. Max, can we pull that audio so I can play that for Ben? It was Florio on. I think it was this show, but it wasn't with Chris Sims. So there was somebody sitting in for Chris Sims. My apologies. I don't know the name, but this is what Florio said on the show. I think it was on Friday.
The day of the NFC Championship, someone I know who is very well plugged in said the Commanders know they're going to get their asses kicked today, and they're just kind of bracing for it. And it's like, come on, man. I mean, no, I know people in the building, they know what's coming. And it's like, well, maybe they're just preparing for the worst. Like, no, they know that the Eagles are dramatically better than they are.
Any reaction there?
Well, I mean, obviously, I didn't talk to anybody about it because I hadn't heard that. But look, do I think that like there were people in the building who were like, man, this is going to be a tough one. The Eagles are this, that, and the other, and our defense has still got some question marks, and whatever. And we've already won 2 on the road. This is kind of we're way ahead of schedule. Sure, but I don't buy for a minute that Dan Quinn and the players thought this way. And look, obviously the final score was what it was, but unless I'm misremembering things, it was not the score was closer, was a lot more of a game than the final score indicated. I mean, look, the Eagles controlled throughout, starting with the Saquon Barkley touchdown run. But right, I mean, if De'Ami Brown doesn't fumble at one time, it was like, as a lot of football games are, a couple plays go a different way. I'm not saying Washington wins, but maybe the score doesn't get out of hand the way that it did. So no, I don't. I would be surprised if anybody, if coaches, players, thought that way. Again, if you're being realistic, sure, the odds of Washington winning were pretty long. I mean, they had the momentum they have. I think I picked them to win just because I was like, I'd give up, saying they're going to lose. And look, they had just beaten Philly, right, in the previous game. So when they met, so I don't know. I find that hard to believe that anybody who's actually involved in the game felt that they were going to get blown out or lose.
Yeah, that was similar to what I felt. And I also feel like if that was really the case, wouldn't we have heard about it way before? At this point, it was May, but wouldn't we have heard about it way before May if Florio had this information? It feels like a weird time to drop that.
Yeah, and also just again, if it were people who were any of the main principals involved, if this were true, we'd have a lot of questions about what's going, what kind of team, like just in general in sports, not to see Washington. I even when all of us on the outside are going, oh my God, this is a blowout, no chance. I don't, the players and the coaches generally don't think that. That's that's the nature of competition. You go out there and you think, why not us? So I just find it hard to believe that anybody would realistically, again, of the main people would have kind of thought that way. And again, they had just beaten Philly a few weeks prior. And now they were on this crazy run, closing out the regular season on a winning streak, beating Tampa and Detroit. I mean, they crushed Detroit. If anything, they're riding high. If anything, you might almost think they're feeling maybe not overconfident, but well, why not us? Why would you? Yeah. So no, I find that hard to believe. But again, if somebody in the building was like, oh, let's be realistic. I mean, look, because I know like I did the game of like, look at the 22 players on offense and defense starting. How many guys for Washington could start for Philly? And the list is, it's definitely like one hand. And that's even counting like Jaden Daniels. And it's not like you would say if you're the Eagles, well, we have to take him over Jalen Hurts, So, yeah, I think from that perspective, yeah, it's easy to say, yeah, Philly's going to win this game. But I don't think that they thought that.
What is your level of excitement for the NBA Finals with the Thunder and Pacers?
Look, obviously, I think the thing to me is like I know people are going to focus on TV ratings, and that stuff doesn't matter for any of us. It just is like a matter of, or advertisers getting the bang for their buck for the NBA, and that's not a problem for any of us. I think the thing is that like there's no legacy here in play. I mean, again, if this is the start of a SGA run towards truly being, a top 100 player in the league because it's the first of several titles, well, then perhaps we'll look back on it that way. But for now, I don't think it's not the sexiest matchup. I do think from a pure basketball standpoint, though, I think it's pretty intriguing. I get the Oklahoma City based on their total record regular season playoffs is the favorite. But, you look at this, like their biggest strength is their depth. Well, Indiana has a pretty decent rotation depth-wise, relative to a lot of other teams we've seen in the playoffs. Defensively, we saw how guys like Nembhard really got out on Jalen Brunson. Not that Brunson didn't get his points, but, they've got defensive guys as well. Oklahoma City is the younger team. I know Caruso has postseason experience, but, Indiana has more of that. So I don't know. I actually think it's closer on paper than people think. I think for me, the ultimate question is probably going to be, outside of the obvious things like, making 3-pointers, but like Oklahoma City's perimeter defenders are, top notch. How much are they able to disrupt Tyrese Halliburton, cause turnovers from him, and, get the Pacers 3-point shooters kind of guessing what's going to happen. I think Indiana can do some of that back, but that's where I think Oklahoma City has a little bit of an edge. So if they can disrupt Halliburton and, the other perimeter guys, I think that's where they can win. But I don't think this is a particularly one-sided affair. I don't know if people are saying that, but I think this is closer than, what the experts think.
Oh my God, it feels like people won't stop saying that. I got to be honest, Ben, I've already bet the Pacers because I've just heard so many people be like, this is a sweep. This is a 5-game series that just naturally I've decided to go against it. I do think that it'll go at least 6 games. I think Indiana takes at least a couple from Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that's really fascinating is, Indiana, like, they just want to run and run and run. Their fast break in the last game against the Knicks, like, it didn't look like an NBA team. It looked more like, peak Kentucky with John Calipari and his, and Anthony Davis teams going up against, like, the worst team in the Ivy League. Like, they were just, like, running on made baskets. And, Oklahoma City wants to push the tempo, too. So this is not a series where either side is, like, wants to slow it down necessarily. They may have to or may choose to. But, they can keep up with how Oklahoma City performs. And, in general, other than SGA, like, it's not like Oklahoma City's been getting consistent offense game in, game out from some of the other guys. I think Jalen Williams is really good. Obviously, Chet Holmgren had his moments. But, I mean, so did some of the other guys. I mean, obviously, like Pascal Siakam, like, I think he's a better number 2 guy than anybody on OKC. So, yeah, does somebody tweak an ankle who gets in foul trouble? Is somebody clanking threes or somebody just, surprisingly making them all? I think it's like that. I don't think this is a 5-game series either, at least not in any kind of blowout fashion.
Yeah, going to be a lot of overbets in terms of the total because those numbers are going to be gargantuan, I think, on the scoreboard. I'll get you out of here on this one. Are you worried that ESPN is going to mess with inside the NBA to the point of no repair?
Well, I mean, I don't know enough about it all, but it sounds like the production aspect is going to remain intact. So I guess the question is, look, ESPN's obviously already loosened the standards when it comes to, say, the Pat McAfee show. So, I would think that they're, going to kind of do that as well here. I think the bigger question I kind of have is, what's it like? Let's just say that the Inside the NBA is the new pregame show, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. What about the postgame show? I mean, one of the I DVR Inside the NBA postgame, even if I'm not watching the actual game, just because you never know what obviously Barkley and them are going to say or do. So that's going to be interesting, but that goes more than a half an hour. Has this become an ESPN2 thing, a streaming thing, or nothing? Is it just more of a, hey, we only have a half an hour to do this? I think to me that would be the crusher, because you need these guys are long form post game in particular. That's what makes it work, that they can go off script, do whatever they kind of want. Will ESPN allow that to happen? Give them the time to do it? That to me would be the bigger issue. The rest of it, if it's the same general people who are producing and directing and all that, I would think it would be similar. But hopefully hopefully they don't mess it up.
Well, especially because they don't have I don't know that they have an official post-game show right now, Ben, on the mothership, but they do have an unofficial post-game show in the form of SportsCenter with one Scott Van Pelt. So I don't know if you want to have it almost feel like you'd be cannibalizing audiences if you have one against the other, both on your platform.
It's true. They already have the Monday Night Football going up against the Manning cast, right? So they already kind of do this in other forms. And, look, if you're going to have Barkley and them, even I think Van Pelt would be like, hey, look, this is, you got to get these guys on there. I mean, it makes sense to have Van Pelt as the post game versus the current iteration of their show, which is just terrible.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have Barkley and them, again, maybe it makes more sense to put them off of ESPN and put them on ESPN2 or something else, because if you're going to give them more time. But so I can see it still going both. Like I said, they do this for football, for actual games. So, we'll see. I'm certainly tuning in to the Barkley, Kenny, all that group whenever possible.
Ben, appreciate it as always. Enjoy this week of OTAs.
Denton, always appreciate it, man. Talk soon.
That has Ben Standig, the Commanders insider here on the Kevin Sheehan Show. You can see him in all of his writing on The Athletic and listen to his podcast, Last Man Standing, as well. Sam Monson of the 33rd team is going to join us in 15 minutes. When we get back, we'll take a look at some of those post-June 1 cuts, if anyone is worth looking at for our Washington Commanders. It is the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin. Don't go anywhere. Sam Monson, the 33rd team, is going to be with us in about 8 minutes here on the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin at the Denton Day on Twitter. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure you go ahead and do that. You see the Kevin Sheehan Show live 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Monday through Friday. You see the Craig Hoffman Show 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. every Monday through Friday. Kevin will be back from vacation on Wednesday, for those of you that were wondering where he is. We just had a conversation with Ben Standing. Sam Monson will be with us here momentarily. It is June 2nd, which means a bunch of NFL players were cut yesterday, but there were also a number of NFL players that we thought maybe could have been cut as a part of the post-June 1 delegated releases, and they were not. Unfortunately for Washington, they don't really need any offensive line help, and they don't really need a whole lot of defensive back help, because those were a majority of the guys that were cut post-June 1, with the exception of like Aaron Rodgers, which they obviously do not need, or Justin Tucker, which for a number of reasons they very much do not need. The way that the Baltimore Ravens have handled the Justin Tucker situation has been like 101 of what not to do as an organization. And for so long, we have held Baltimore in this class of just doing things the right way. They always make the right decisions. They always handle things with the utmost class. Well, they have just royally butchered that with the Justin Tucker thing, to the point where last week Jim Harbaugh was like, yeah, this is really complex. There was a lot of things that went into it. What went into it, Jim? Or John, excuse me. But I was like, John, what went into it? And he was like, oh, it was football. Yeah, it's all football. That was the only reason. It's very much a smack in the face. But obviously Washington does not need Justin Tucker right now, and they wouldn't sign him even if they desperately needed Justin Tucker, because they actually do need a kicker, but he was bad last year on and off the field, and not in good ways. There are a number of names that could be or gain some interest and intrigue in terms of post-June 1 trades. You know, guys didn't get cut, but if you get traded now, there's certain contract hits that are going to be a lot more manageable for certain teams, mostly the teams that are trading particular players. Kirk Cousins is on that list. Washington does not need Kirk Cousins. Will Levis on that list. Will Levis is not coming to Washington. I will point out Antonio Gibson is on that list. I would not be opposed to a reunion of Antonio Gibson in Washington. Admittedly, his role is not going to be anywhere near as large as it once was when he was here, but I did always like some of the things that he brought to the table offensively, especially with Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator. The problem is that the way the roster is currently constructed here in D.C., there is no room at the table for him. You already have 4 running backs with the potential of more than that. Adding a guy in Antonio Gibson now, unless you want to convert him back to wide receiver, but even still, you have a lot of wide receivers on the roster. I think that's I just always liked Gibson, so seeing him as a guy that could be traded in the post-June 1 is fascinating. Jalen Ramsey, we had a lot of conversation about last week. I'm just reading off of this CBS article that lists some of the noteworthy names. Jair Alexander in Green Bay was a guy that at one point looked like he was going to be the future of that Green Bay Packer defense, and things obviously have not lived up to that if he's a guy that Green Bay could potentially move on from. But he's only, he's 28 years old, playing the defensive back. You need a little bit of swag. I think the money that could be saved by Green Bay is about $17 million. The thing is, this goes for Jalen Ramsey as well. Washington already is a little loaded in the defensive backfield. Could you get better? Yes. But what are you going to give up, and what are you willing to give up to get better at a spot that you are already a little stacked at? There's at least a log jam of sorts there, with the expectation along with that Mikey Sanderstill and Trey Amos are going to be your guys for the foreseeable future at those positions. Do you want to stunt their growth potentially by adding someone in like a Jair Alexander or a Jalen Ramsey, who would be good, but I don't know how good. I don't know how much of a difference they would be making on defense. And then Tyreek Hill is on this list. Tyreek Hill does not want to be in Miami. He has said he doesn't want to be in Miami. He only said that he wanted to be in Miami when he had meetings and they said, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that anymore. And then he's like, you know what? I actually love this place. I love Miami. I've never wanted to leave here. Everything that you heard me say when I said it afterwards was not true. That must have been an evil twin. Tyreek Hill would not fit here. He just wouldn't. He wouldn't fit here from a money standpoint. He wouldn't fit in here from a personality standpoint. There has not been a lot of good things said about Tyreek Hill, the person, and Washington is trying to navigate this organization in a way where you are fitting in with the culture of being a commander, and Tyreek Hill is very much Very much not that. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of guys that are at positions of need for Washington, which is along that defensive line. So that just is what it is. I'm not expecting them to make a lot of moves on the post June 1 market. Those were just names on there. So you can know the names and who certain other teams in the NFL might be targeting in the post June 1 market. All right, Sam Monson, 33rd team, is going to join us when we get back to wrap the show up. Don't go anywhere. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show with Dende sitting in.
All right. EA Sports makes it official. Saquon Barkley will be the official cover athlete of Madden 26. The offensive player of the year threatened to break Eric Dickerson's all-time rushing record last year, notching over 2,000 yards in 16 games. Lions Pro Bowl center Frank Ragnow has informed the team of his intention to retire. Ragnow played all 7 seasons of his career in Detroit and is coming off a season where he ranked number 2 among NFL centers and was named back-to-back second-team All-Pro. The Nats, they fall yesterday to the Diamondbacks by a score of 3-1. The Nats are 10-4 in their last 14 games. Will begin their series versus the Cubs tomorrow at 6:45. And sports fans around the world are grieving today after it was announced in a Facebook post that sports science host John Brinkus passed away following a bout with depression. The mastermind of sports minutia was often very open regarding his mental health struggles, and his family has urged those who struggle with similar afflictions to seek help. He was 54. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980 and hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live from 10 to 1 and Craig Hoffman from 4 to 7. Don't forget to like the stream and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that's what's trending.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. Max just told you in his update before we hit the break, Lions center Frank Ragnow announcing his retirement at 29 years of age. That's a big-time loss for Detroit ahead of the 2025 season. Let's head to the phones now. Welcome on Sam Monson, 33rd team. Sam, first and foremost, man, appreciate you making some time for us. Always great to catch up. Your reaction to Frank Ragnow announcing his retirement on social media today?
Yeah, huge loss for the Lions. Ragnow, when he's healthy, and that is a significant caveat for him throughout his NFL career, but when he's healthy, he's one of the best centers in football, and the Lions have had, a top 2, top 3 offensive line in the league for the last few years. It's been a huge building block for that offense and for how good they've been. So potentially a huge loss for that offensive line.
Are they at a point now? I mean, we just had the post June 1 moves, and there were a couple offensive linemen that are now on the open market. Are they at a good position where at least they can find a way to backfill that?
Yeah, I think they'll certainly be in the market or potentially looking around for some of those veteran names. I also think it probably informed their draft. I don't think that I doubt Ragnow only informed them of this a couple of weeks ago, and this is a massive shock to them. I'm sure that this was at least on the horizon for them or something they were bearing in mind. The rookie Tate Ratledge, who is a guard by name, he's been getting some first-team reps at center, is potentially a solution in-house, a guy they drafted this year. Everyone assumed he was cover for guard and competition maybe for Christian Mahogany at right guard or the succession plan for Graham Glasgow at left guard, each of which may still be true, but he might now also be pressed into service as the starting center or at least an option there.
So I want to talk a little bit about the team here that we cover, the Commanders. It's been a good offseason for the Commanders, great according to some. When you look at the moves Washington has made this offseason, how do you look at it?
Yeah, I think it's been a good offseason. I think for Washington, you look at it and you say, if there's criticism of the offseason moves, it's that they didn't necessarily address some sort of key areas of weakness on the roster. And I think it's more an indication of where this roster was coming out of last season. And I think, Washington is in a great situation and moving in the right direction, and the arrow is pointed up and everything is good. In large part because, the biggest things they did like a year ago all hit. Jaden Daniels looks like a future MVP. The coaching ticket looks great. Like all of these things they did a year ago worked. And so the trajectory of this team can only be pointed up. But I think because of how far they went last season with the playoff run, it leads you to think that this team may be better on paper than it was. And it still had some fairly significant weaknesses. So they had a lot of work to do this offseason. I think they've done some. Laramie Tunsil is potentially a massive upgrade at left tackle for them. Bringing in Deebo Samuel is potentially a huge move as well. But it still didn't tick all the boxes. And I think that's the potential sort of criticism or area of that was lacking this offseason. There's still a couple of areas where you look at going into the year and saying, man, that could still be a problem for them.
Is defensive line that biggest spot there?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, edge rusher, I think, is a major issue. Defensive tackle may be better. I think a lot's going to rest on what we see in year 2 of Johnny Newton. Disappointed as a rookie, but he was dealing with injury. He got injured, before the season. I think Mike Tomlin talks about this. Sometimes it's difficult for those young guys to jump on a moving train. And if they miss the key time in training camp or preseason and early in the year, you may basically be writing off their rookie season. They're going to play, they're going to see the field, but you may never see the player that you might have gotten if you hadn't gotten hurt at the kind of critical adjustment period.
Are there any names out there, Sam, at the edge spot, veteran guys that you feel like would come in and immediately make Washington better at that position?
It's tough because, the guys that are available now are obviously available for a reason. There's some, I think, that can potentially move the needle or make waves, particularly because this roster, has the holes that need it. A guy like Zadarius Smith has been able to come in for multiple years now and made an impact on defensive lines. I think he's a guy that could absolutely make an impact. But yeah, it's not a vintage group of edge rushers that are definitely available to come in and dominate it. You know, a guy like Matthew Judon was traded for a couple of years ago and didn't have the kind of impact that maybe the team was expecting him to. So yeah, I mean, I think there's veteran players that can come in and absolutely upgrade, but not necessarily be solutions.
Sam Monson, my guest here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton, sitting in for Kevin here on the Team 980. Sam, if you are the Pittsburgh Steelers, would you rather have Aaron Rodgers or Kirk Cousins?
I think you would rather have Aaron Rodgers. For Cousins, I think is a rough fit for that particular environment. And by that I mean actual weather environment. You know, the stadium, the outdoors, the cold, the elements. Kirk Cousins, based on last year, and maybe this will be different, you know, a year recovered from that Achilles, even though he's younger than Aaron Rodgers, he's effectively a year behind him in terms of physical recovery, you know, at an advanced stage from a significant injury. We sort of saw Rodgers, I think, already much further ahead in terms of recovery based off how he was physically last year. Kirk Cousins looks like he's just come back from an Achilles injury. If that's going to be who he is from now on, you don't want him if you're outdoors. I think he needs to be in a dome. We saw last season there were throws he couldn't make. That offense needed to change to effectively take away some of the acts that he couldn't do anymore. Whatever we thought about Aaron Rodgers last season, playing outdoors, there weren't throws that were off the table. He could still make every throw he needed to. Maybe the throws that were limited were when he had to move and run around physically. You know, throwing on the move or just being athletic on the move wasn't as where it used to be. But in terms of just sitting there in the pocket, he could still hit every area of the field, and Cousins couldn't. So I don't like Kirk Cousins for Pittsburgh for that reason, that if that hasn't changed, if that hasn't improved, you're going to get a lot of rough weather games in that division. And, you know, that's not where Kirk Cousins looks like he's going to do well right now.
Do you think that they actually want Aaron Rodgers, the person?
I don't know if they want Aaron Rodgers, the person. I think they want Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback, or at least the theoretical potential of what Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback, brings. And they've kind of backed themselves into a corner of almost needing it at this point. Otherwise, they're running into the season starting, you know, Mason Rudolph.
Changing up here. If Philadelphia is the best team, they're the defending champs, the consensus best team coming into this, who do you think is second best in the NFL?
I mean, I think you're going to be looking either at the Detroit Lions still. I know they lost a game earlier than they would have been expecting to lose, certainly last year, but this is still one of the best rosters in the NFL. The concern you would have about them is the same thing that happened to the Eagles a couple of years ago. They lost both coordinators in one offseason, and we saw the impact that had on Philadelphia. I think the Lions will be worrying, quietly, or at least hoping that doesn't have the same impact to them. But they would be one of the teams. I think Buffalo in the AFC is really well positioned. Buffalo and Baltimore. Kansas City had a good offseason. I don't think they're going to be going anywhere, even though they got blown out of the Super Bowl. I think those are the three AFC teams, most years that are looking like they're going to go back to that. I don't think that any of those three are going to be going anywhere this year.
Have we seen the limit for Jared Goff, or do you still think that he can get better even in the absence of Ben Johnson?
Yeah, I think we've probably seen his ceiling. The thing is, his ceiling has been a bit inconsistent. This is his limit, but that doesn't mean he can't, just put together the kind of high end of his range of outcomes and for an entire season end up playing like an all-pro. I mean, I think he's already shown that he's capable of that kind of level of play. It's just that there's usually, a 3 or 4 game stretch somewhere in there that drags him down a little bit. If he's able to avoid that, and I think it's a weird thing with NFL quarterbacks that they can sometimes put together these seasons where they just weed out the bad stretch that normally comes with it. If he's able to avoid that, I think he's able to play at the kind of level that puts him in, to the elite category. I think there's clearly a step between him and guys like, Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, or honestly, even what we saw from Jaden Daniels at times last season. but he's definitely capable of that level of play over a 17-game schedule.
Sam Monson with us here, the 33rd team here on the Kevin Sheehan Show with Denton Day sitting in for Kevin here on a Monday. Only a couple more for you here, Sam. When I look at Kansas City, they are old. I mean, Mahomes is not, but a lot of his help is mainly Travis Kelce. How many more years do you think Kelce has in the NFL?
I think we're dealing with it on a kind of year-by-year basis at this point. Last season was the first year where it looked like there wasn't more in the tank. The year before, he'd had a kind of weird season where it started slowly, but by the playoffs, he was clicked back into gear and he looked like vintage Kelce again. Last year was the first year where it looked like that didn't exist anymore. And I don't know that he has that in him anymore. If he has another season this year where that looks like it's the case, I would imagine he walks away at the end of this year almost regardless, unless he's the type of guy that wants to wring sort of every last ounce out of his career and, play into the league says they're done with him. I would suspect this becomes his last season.
I mean, if he's gonna marry Taylor Swift, I would go be the trophy husband, Sam. If I'm gonna go marry a billionaire, you will not see me working another day in my life.
No, I mean, look, he's made his money. He's got in a great situation personally. He's going to have business opportunities as well. His podcast is massive. All those things are huge. And yeah, I'm probably with you, but you hear it from players all the time. You're never going to replicate the locker room. You're never going to replicate the camaraderie, the unique things that come with being a professional football player. And I think it's entirely understandable the guys that want to cling on to that until the league says, no more. We're not going to give you any more opportunities, even if it involves, playing as this sort of diminished shadow of what you used to be. You're clinging on to the lifestyle, to the thing that you're never going to replicate for the next, decades of your lifetime. I get it. I think I'm with you, but that's why we're not professional athletes, or at least one of the reasons.
Sam, greatly appreciate it, my friend. Hope you're doing well. We'll do it again soon.
Anytime, guys. Take it easy.
That is Sam Monson here on the Kevin Sheehan Show from the 33rd team, joining us. Denton Day sitting in for Kevin. Max, it would not be if my wife was a billionaire, you would not see me here ever.
So my buddy proposed to me over the weekend.
Congrats.
Thanks, Denton. Appreciate it.
That was a layup. I'm sorry.
It was the cleanest. I teed you up for it, man. But he was like, if you won $200,000, would you quit your job? I was like, no, I like working here too much. No. And then he's like, 500,000. No. $1 million? I'm starting to consider it.
I mean, so this is going to be the craziest thing that I think I've ever said. $200,000 is not enough to quit.
It's not.
No.
The older I've gotten,
are you kidding me?
The more I've realized.
Yeah, $200,000 would be nice. I'd feel really good about $200,000.
I feel incredible.
But you're not quitting your job for $200,000. Even $1 million, you're like, I mean, I'll quit my job for a little bit, but I'd eventually have to come back and work unless you were just like a money-making savant in terms of like where you place it and having that money grow for you. If you just win $1 million, you still got I'll be here Monday.
Yeah, no, I'm putting in an account that I'm not touching for a few years. I'm letting it grow off interest, and then I'll consider it.
Now, if he gave me like a Terry McLaurin contract for a year, you would not see me.
Correct.
$30 million, that'd be plenty. I'll be good. I'll be chilling somewhere where it's nice, where there's water, probably like Utah, where there's mountains and stuff. I'll be I'll be hanging out there. My guy in the chat says, how about $200,000 a year? Well, that's the goal in this profession.
That's right.
That is the goal. That's going to do it for us here. Kevin's going to be back on Wednesday. Linnell will be in for tomorrow. So looking forward to that. Chris Russell coming up next year on the Kevin Sheehan Show. I have been Denton Day. Hit me up on Twitter @the Denton Day. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. The Rooster coming up next.